My name is Marshall Sewell, and I am a fifth-generation farmer. Unfortunately, lost my dad to suicide.
My apologies, y'all. We're going to be just a few more minutes. We're waiting for members to come in. A lot of work was done today over in the house, but it ran everybody late. While we're waiting, though, I do want y'all to know there's a sign-up sheet here at the front if anybody needs to sign in that would like to speak. And we have a couple of people we know that have been waiting all day for this and need to be gone. We're going to give a little bit of accommodation for that. So if you do have a deadline you're trying to meet as well, if you would just come let Amber or I know, we'll do what we can. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have people juggling a few committees, but I, again, just want to say thank you so much to each of you that have waited and waited and waited for us to start this hearing. So I appreciate you. We have several more coming in, as well as several advocates as well, I think. So if you will continue to sign up, make sure to sign on the sign-up sheet if you would like to speak. And I am going to ask
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chairman Mathiak to start us off with a word of prayer as soon as I get your.
If you'll bow your heads. Thank you, dear Father, for this day that you've provided, and thank you for the busyness that we've endured today. I think we got a lot of work done, and we're just thankful that you are who you are, and we just ask you to have everybody just take a deep breath, and we're here to listen, we're here to learn, and we're just appreciative of everybody being here today. I ask all this in your Son's name. Amen.
Thank you so much. That deep breath is real important, I know, for each and every one of us. So I do know, like I said, there are a couple people that we know that have got to get on the road. So we're going to kind of kick it around just a little bit, and we'll see. I haven't heard from anyone else that you need to leave. So I'm thinking that means everybody can be a little bit patient with us. But I know I have at least two groups. One is not in the room, but we'll start with Darcy Webb, the director for Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities, and thank you. Let me get your.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is that good on the microphone? Yeah? Okay. Well, thank you all for the opportunity and for the deep breath. I am pleased to have this opportunity to present you all with our state fiscal 2025 budget presentation. So as y'all know, our mission here at the Council is to bring about social and policy changes that promote opportunities for people with developmental disabilities and their families to live, learn, work, play, and worship in their Georgia communities. Now, the bulk of our funds are federal. We are administratively attached to DBHDD, and we are governed by a council of members, which I always say I think that's really important to know that 60% of our members by law must be people with developmental disabilities or their family members. So on your tracking sheet, we are in the middle of page 20. You can see in the governor's budget, we've got the COLA for one staff salary there. Now, the reason there's only one is state employees whose salaries are paid with federal funds or grants, which is most of our folks, do not receive the state COLAs. So that brings us up to $786,942 in state funds, and almost all of our state funds, as per legislative intent, are for inclusive post-secondary education. Of those inclusive post-secondary funds, $600,000 flow directly through us to the 10 programs. Now, I do say 10 programs because while Berry College is not yet accepting students, we have a funding formula, and that does take into account that startup year effectively while the program is preparing to accept students. So they are being supported as well. I want to thank you all on this committee for your ongoing support of inclusive post-secondary education, including last year in the amended 23 when you gave us an extra $100,000, and in 2024 when you increased the funding by $200,000. It really is tremendously appreciated by us, by the programs, and most important, the students. I do have a few updated numbers for you on the IPSI grants, which is the scholarship funds. Our fall semester final numbers are there were 143 inclusive post-secondary students, and 113 received IPSI grants. Now for spring semester, of course, it just started, so these numbers are preliminary. They could be off by a few, but we have 142 students enrolled and 123 have received IPSI grants. There is space and time for them to apply as the semester goes on, so that's why I say they are preliminary. We continue to hear from students, families, and schools that scholarships have been the most pressing need. And those have been the most pressing need for a long time. And it's important to understand that the cost of an IPSI program really comes in two big pieces. You've got your standard university or technical school tuition, but then you also have what's known as an IPSI fee. and that pays for the additional support that students need to succeed in higher education. For example, I think you all know that when students attend an IPSI program, they're going to catalog classes with typically matriculating peers. But then after a class meets, it's a typical practice, not necessarily across the board, but it's very par for the course for an IPSI student to then meet with an IPSI staff, make sure they've processed the material, make sure they're set for what they need to do next, and that IPSI staff support is not going to be covered by that standard university tuition. So expenses like that are why there is such a thing as the IPSI fees. Last year, we were all thrilled with the passage of Senate Bill 246, and of course that language originated in the House, but that created these IPSI grant scholarships. And this year, students have been able to use those for the cost of tuition. So these numbers here that you see, this is for their tuition. It does not cover the IPSI fees, and that is simply because last year was the first year and the amount put in the 2024 budget is not enough to cover both tuition and the fees. And so we're focusing our IPSI advocacy around those IPSI grants and adding an additional $1.4 million to the budget of the Georgia Student Finance Commission. That is where the IPSI grant dollars flow. So we are not asking for additional funds from y'all on this committee at this time because, number one, we're really focused on what we have consistently heard is the biggest need, which is the scholarship funds. And two, quite frankly, in the spirit of fiscal responsibility, especially with the new reality of these scholarships, we want to really make sure that we're using all of the funds allocated to us to maximum effectiveness. Okay, so continuing in the spirit of good news, from IPSI grants to the DD rate study, I'd like to touch here. I don't need to tell you all that this rate study is just critical to Georgians with developmental disabilities and their families, not to mention our service providers. And we are thrilled that the governor included $79 million in his budget to support the rate study and that DBHDD committed to $28 million out of ARPA funds. I know many of you champion the need for this rate study to be fully funded. I also know that I don't have a full picture of everything that went on behind the scenes. But I really want to say thank you for your support of this community and your ongoing advocacy for this budget item. Now, I'm sharing this next slide as a reinforcement of how critical the rate study and really every dime in it are. So, and also just for us to all be clear-eyed about the history of disability policy and services to make sure we're moving in the right direction. So historically, Georgia's fiscal effort in intellectual and developmental disability services has been relatively low. You can see there in the fiscal 2021 numbers that we are the third lowest in the Southeast, and that puts us at about 56% of the national average. Now, it's really important, this was fiscal 2021, and I really do believe that as we go forward, the numbers are going to reflect that Georgia is heading in the right direction. And that's when you take into account the recent waiver investments, but also the rate study, presuming the rate study makes it across the finish line of this budget intact, which I think it's fair to say the disability community is united, that is critically important. I include this slide also, so should any of your colleagues, or frankly anybody else, say, well, why $79 million? I think it's a good visual representation of why we are doing what we're doing. We're getting ourselves on the right track. So our advocacy focus this year and last has been on waivers and wages. Of course, wages are part of that DD rate study, so I want to take a minute to focus on the waivers. The now and comp waivers for Georgians with developmental disabilities allow Georgians with the most significant impact of their developmental disability to live in their own homes and communities rather than institutions. Now, the vast majority of Georgians with a developmental disability do not qualify for the now or comp waiver. And that's why you see the gap in those numbers there on this slide of approximately 226,000 families here in Georgia who are caregivers for someone with IDD, which is about 6% of our state's households. But then those numbers of who's on the waiver and who's waiting for one are much lower. Each state does determine that criteria for who's eligible, and in Georgia we have a relatively high bar. That eligibility has to be an intellectual disability or something much like one. So that just explains why those numbers are so different. Now, as of January, there were approximately 13,300 Georgians who were receiving now or comp, and as of January, over 7,300 on the waiting list. We have talking about a list for a very long time here in Georgia. And I do need to say that we in the disability community have been so excited and also so very grateful to you all in the General Assembly for investing in 500 new waivers 513 2 years ago and 500 last year. It's a major investment, and we are very grateful because every waiver really is life-changing for that person and their family and those in their circle. So given a sense of that, I did want to take a quick look back at our recent waiver history. So this chart shows us a picture of the last 11 years. The tall blue bars, you can see they're starting on the left in 2014 and going through 2024. These are the number of folks on the wait list for a now or a comp waiver. So I mentioned earlier that we're looking currently at a bit over 7,300, and you can see looking at the bars, we've hovered between about 6,000 and 9,000 here for this time period. Now, if you look at the dark blue bars at the very bottom, those reflect newly funded waivers in each budget year. So you can see the years of 2014 to 2022, that number ranges from 75 to 250, and then in 2023 and 24, those reflect those investments of 513 and 500. The light green bars on top of the dark blue, you've got the two kind of stacked up there. So that represents the estimated annual attrition off of now and comp. And DBHDD, of course, estimates about 400 folks come off of now and comp each year. Generally, that happens because one of two things: either they moved out of state or they passed away. But when that happens, then DBHDD staff have been working hard to fill that waiver availability and put other folks into service. So I really want to thank Commissioner Tanner and his team, both for their transparency about that attrition, but also for the hard work of the staff who do that work of backfilling that waiver availability. But unfortunately, you can see where, even though through the past 2 years where we've had about 900 folks a year come into services, it really has not had much of an impact on the size of the list. And so if I was going to summarize the takeaway from this graph, I would say I read it as these waiver investments in the last 2 years plus the rate study are tremendous. They truly are. But I think it also shows the work must continue. So as we continue the conversation, my hope is that all of us working on this in Georgia can really redefine what we mean when we say someone needs a waiver. Because we know waivers bring tremendous benefits. They're obviously critical human services, but you can see here we like to talk about the economic impact as well. That waivers boost the family stability because it lets caregivers obtain, improve, sometimes just maintain employment, keeping a job. And the livable wages help our providers. They can hire and retain staff who contribute to the local economy. And then, of course, it empowers folks with disabilities to contribute to their communities. I would argue that the state of Georgia, that we don't want waivers to be something people access when they're in crisis. You know, for example, they're being sent out of state for treatment, or they turn up in a hospital ER, and in some cases, unfortunately, the state is not familiar with those folks until they find them in the ER, until they are in that state of crisis. So, you know, I think we, as a state, we really want a person to be on a waiver as soon as it makes sense for them to be on that waiver. And for many people, not everybody, but for many people, that's going to be right as they come out of high school or soon thereafter. Now, we do have some folks who are ahead of the game, and hats off to them. But I'm thinking of the families who go ahead and get their child's name on a list, and the child is still in school, and by their own admission, they don't need a waiver right then, and that's great. But I will also share that those of us who do advocacy work, we also hear from a lot of folks waiting, and they may not be in a state of crisis, but there are situations like they have an adult child who's stuck on the couch all day alone. They have a parent on the verge of quitting work. So in those situations, I would argue that they do need a waiver, and they need a waiver at that time. So to that end, so this year we continue our advocacy for the number of waivers that were recommended in the 2022 bipartisan Senate Study Committee, and that was to add 2,400 new now and comp waivers to the fiscal 25 budget. We also strongly support the governor and DBHDD's commitment to fully funding that rate study. And again, of course, that's $79 million in the budget plus $28 million in ARPA. And the final thing is just a note that we do believe in the wisdom of creating an IDD commission, similar to our Behavioral Health Commission. We think that can really help us on the trajectory we're on, but as we move from a place of response to crisis into innovation. All right, thank you all so much for this opportunity to present. I am happy to take any questions the committee might have.
Thank you so much. Great presentation and some really good information for us to work off of. I believe Representative Anulowicz has a question.
I just wanted to thank you for this update and for the great news that we've had with IPSI. And I know we are going to be trying to work very hard to see everything we can do with the waivers, because it is so critical. But with what y'all done with IPSI, I was so glad to get this update. It's great news. I'll be with some of the kids from Excel at Georgia Tech tomorrow for a Valentine's Day event. It's a wonderful one. Y'all do amazing work with these programs. It really transforms lives. So I will never pass up an opportunity to thank y'all for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? I'm not seeing any. So I just want to say thank you for the continued work you're doing, especially like Representative Anulowicz said, in the IPSI world. We've seen so many huge changes there, and I think there are even more to come. So thank you. Thank you.
Of course. We are projecting the numbers will go up next year with the availability of the grants.
Yeah.
I think up to, what are we projecting, Star, up in the 170s? 176 is projected. So it
That's
really is
great.
going to become available. Star Bruner, of course, and my team does all things IPSI, Harry Nelson, my deputy director, and Charlotte Densmore, public policy director.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't introduce them at the start.
Good team. Appreciate y'all so much. And I know recently we had a number of students that were here for their day, and it was very good. I had several members comment to me about conversations they had, and at least one I know of that didn't know previously about the program. So pat them on the back and tell them job well done.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Now, I believe we have ESP, Extra Special People. If y'all are ready to move up this way, and I will tell you, there is a table here too, if that's easier for y'all to come to, because I think there are 3 presenters. And then, unless we hear otherwise, we'll go back as planned to begin with behavioral health following this. Did they have? The microphone on for y'all.
All right.
Laura, I want you to introduce yourself and your team to everyone, because we may have a few new members that are here, and I want everybody out there in the world to learn and hear about y'all too.
Awesome. Well, thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to be here. This is Leah's first time to the Capitol, and she actually just got to talk to the First Lady outside, which is why she is shining brightly right now. And we are just honored to be here. My name is Laura Hope Whitaker. I'm the CEO of ESP, or Extra Special People, which we're here to share a little bit more about. We serve children and young adults with developmental disabilities all over the state, and we exist to create transformative opportunities for people with disabilities and their families, and we believe it's changing communities. That's the key word, communities for the better. I'm here with my team member, Alex Perry and Amy Spade, and we are all here absolutely thrilled for you to have the opportunity to meet Miss Leah. So ESP has grown. We are a 37-year organization that started in Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs. We have over 1,000 college students that are at our Athens campus that volunteer every single day, and we now serve over 1,000 individuals throughout the state. We have grown to now serve individuals in the Rome area and the Atlanta area in Marietta, and we are hoping to be able to grow our roots, much like the Boys and Girls Club or Habitat for Humanity. We have a proven process of 37 years of serving our individuals with disabilities and their families, and we hope to grow to the Savannah area in this next year. So my hope is that you'll be able to hear from Leah. We fulfill our mission in 3 different ways. The first way is our 360 program. That's an after-school program and family support. So from the time a child is born with a disability, they are brought into a community that provides music therapy, family support, counseling, weekend support and respite, after-school programs, adult programming, and so much more. We also have our summer camp program, which is how ESP was started 37 years ago. And our last program, the way in which we fulfill our mission, is through Java Joy. Did you know that 87% of adults with disabilities who want and can work are unemployed? I'm sure you know that, being on this committee. And ESP's role in that is to provide meaningful employment while we teach individuals in our community how to engage people with disabilities. I'm excited for you to meet Leah. She is one of our Joyristas. That's a barista plus joy equals Joyrista. And she is here to share a little bit more about her story. So Leah, would you share a little bit about what ESP means to you, what Java Joy means to you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I live in California since the age of 13. And then I move here, and a lot of people, my family were trying to find something that I can be involved in, make friends and everything. So everybody keep saying that, oh, you guys need to be involved with ESP. So I believe I was involved in ESP in 2020, either 2021 or 2020. ESP has changed me for the better because they gave me an opportunity to work, an opportunity to spread joys to the teachers, to the to all over our county, and I get to meet a lot of amazing people, and my favorite thing is to be able to give hugs to people because you never know what that person's going through that day. A little small gesture can make their day a little brighter, and thank you so much for everything you do.
Great job, Leah. Leah has the opportunity at ESP to have 2 things that I believe as a mom I want for my kids, and that's purpose and community. It's not just a service. ESP is a way of life. And our growth in the Northwest Georgia area, in the Atlanta area, in the Northeast area, and soon to be in South Georgia is just for that reason. It is community and it is purpose. Our growth is in response to the overwhelming need for community. In Georgia, 14.9% of children have a disability. And that is significant. And the state needs services like ESP, communities like ESP, to not only serve them, but to teach the rest of the community, my kids, my 3 typical children, how to include and engage people with disabilities so we have inclusive communities. And that's what ESP is all about. Because of the state, ESP has been able to grow. We now are serving 1,000 individuals throughout the state, and we're not stopping. We have a proven business model and we operate like a business. We operate lean and we are growing fast. And that is for one thing and one thing only, to serve more individuals in the state of Georgia. In Rome, we're actively working to meet the demand. We're hoping to build a building and complex like we have in Watkinsville with a universally accessible playground where little 2 and 3-year-olds who don't have a disability are being engaged on a playground with people with disabilities, and they're saying, "Mommy, I want to go to ESP." And little do they know they'll be our future volunteers one day. That's what we're hoping to build in Rome, Georgia. In Atlanta, we're growing. We're at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and continuing to grow Java Joy and our other programs in In Athens, we're trying to figure out how to deal with the wait list. Over 800 individuals are being served in the Northeast Georgia area in Athens, Georgia, and we're growing with a partnership with our Clark County schools. So this ripple continues, right? It goes from someone like Leah to her family, to the volunteers at the University of Georgia, to the little 2 and 3-year-olds on the playground, to the donor, to the business that books Java Joy and all of a sudden realizes, wait a second, I could also employ an adult with a disability, and my business could benefit from that. The ripple of ESP continues and changes an entire community for the better. Gandhi once said the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And I definitely believe that in my 19 years. I started as a 19-year-old executive director at the University of Georgia, and it's been my greatest joy to serve the organization and watch it grow over the years. So here's what we need. First and foremost, we want you to hear that we are so grateful. We could not have grown over these last 2 years without the support of the state. We've been going for 37 years without the support from the state, and we would not have made it with inflation and increased costs without the support from the state. So we are so very thankful. It costs us about $5,000 a family a year to do what we do, which we think are very proud of. The state currently gives us $600,000 and helps us fund 120 individuals of those 1,000 individuals. We fundraise and provide corporate partnerships and figure out a way to serve the 880 additional individuals that we serve. Our ask of you today is this. I brought a picture of this guy. This is Noah. I was at my daughter's basketball game a couple weeks ago. Noah is 8 and has cerebral palsy. I walked up to his mom and I started talking to her and I said, have you ever heard of ESP? She said, yeah, I look at everything on social media. It's such a beautiful community. I said, has Noah ever played sports? She said, no. And I said, well, we have Miracle League where you get to cheer on Noah on the other side in the stands. She said, I really want to do that. And she said, how can I get involved? And I said, well, welcome to the family. We'll get you involved however we can. But to be totally honest, we might have to put you on a wait list. We are back there in Athens, Georgia. The need is tremendous, not only in the Athens area, but in Rome, in Atlanta, in Savannah. We have a proven model and we want to spread it, just like we're spreading the joy, just like the hugs that we give. We want to take this proven model throughout the state, and we would be humbled, honored, and so very grateful to get the continued support, and more support means more individuals that we have the opportunity to serve. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you on behalf of Noah, on behalf of Leah, on behalf of my 3 kids that get to learn how to engage people of all abilities. And thank you on behalf of all of those that we serve.
Thank you so much. Wait a minute. Okay, we'll get my volume up. Thank y'all so much. Members of the committee, some of you were here when we did First Fund, ESP. And they have used that money wisely and have grown. And so they're asking for more from us. And I just want to know, are there any questions to understand the programming they do? Because you got a little highlight real quick, but there is a lot to it. So I believe I see Representative Nolowitz, is that right?
You mentioned Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Did we see Java Joy there when we were there for Eggs and Issues earlier this
You
year.
did.
Okay, I wanted to. I thought that's who y'all were. You did Leah. Y'all did a wonderful job. You and your teammates did a fantastic job there, and you did give really great hugs.
It's true. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments to clarify anything from the other members of the committee? So you are number 21. Chairman Mathieu.
Thank you. I remember meeting you
Yeah,
last
I remember
year.
that
Yes,
too.
yes. Awesome. Awesome program. Tell me a little bit about the jobs that the kids get.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is I've been involved in some data centers that are hiring young adults with autism
Yep.
for some very specific reasons. So I want to talk to you about that offline. But what kind of jobs do they get to engage in?
Absolutely. Well, Leah could probably tell you better than I, but there's 3 different jobs. Actually, we now have a 4th job. We have just promoted 2 of our joyristas who've been with us for 5 years to a management positions, which is pretty awesome. But there is everything from they're pouring the actual coffee or expanding, which they're handing out cards, they're giving hugs, they're interacting. We teach a lot of customer service related things that are transferable to other areas. A lot of our individuals on the spectrum are the ones in the back that are pouring and very perfectly systematically pouring the coffee, putting the sleeves on, all of that. And then there are those that set up as well, so that are getting everything ready, brewing in the back, preparing. So based on their ability and also their interest, that's where we're going to place them. But we're also going to challenge them and train them and cross-train them with other jobs. Our goal is for them to work at Java Joy, but also to get jobs in other places. And what we have found about businesses is they need to actually see individuals with disabilities
Right.
in their place of business in order to actually picture it. In order for their neural connections to see oh my gosh, this person could actually benefit, but these abilities that I'm seeing through Java Joy could benefit my business. And so we're seeing that pretty regularly. And it gives us the opportunity to educate business leaders on how they can employ adults with disabilities.
Got it.
Great question. Thank you.
you.
And then also just to highlight a little bit, besides Java Joy, your camp experiences and your daily services that are all encompassing for families, I think, are so important. Any updates on that and how they're going?
Absolutely. So, you mentioned the daily services. So right now, there's probably about 150 college students driving up to ESP to be a buddy. And there are opportunities for our participants to have a typical life doing sports and arts and crafts and yoga. And what our kids have the opportunity to do after school is what ESP provides to people of all abilities. And that's inclusive of individuals that have challenging behaviors or individuals that need full support. We provide those opportunities. So today there are 150 individuals. Some are swimming, some are bowling, some are doing yoga, some are doing music therapy with our partnership with UGA, and that's happening in Rome, in Marietta, and in Athens. Great question.
Okay, well, great. I don't see any other questions from anyone, so that means you've done a great job and you've left us with a good piece to work from too as we go
Absolutely.
through this process. So if you've got any questions, be in touch. But in the meantime, thank y'all so much. So get back to Athens and start taking care of all those
That's
sweet
right.
people.
Thank you
y'all.
guys for having
Thank you
us
for
so much.
traveling.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much. Great presentation too, Leah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank y'all. So, and there is a sign-up sheet, remember everybody, is it on the table right here in the front, if anyone has come in since we began, who would like to also speak to us at any time. And if you have a deadline you've got to meet and get out here, we're going to do our best to accommodate you, so make sure to come tell one of us if that is the case. Just come up behind here, make sure we know. Okay, so let's begin with the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. Commissioner Tanner, and whichever is more comfortable, whether it is there at the podium or at the table.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was listening to the previous presentation, exceptionally special people. My daughter actually is a senior at Georgia, and she's been volunteering there since she was a freshman. She loves that program and all of her buddies there. She sends me pictures once or twice a week, and she just absolutely loves that program. So thank you for funding that and for what they do. So we'll get started. First, I want to go through the summary of some statewide adjustments that you all are obviously familiar with. First is the increase of cost of living by 4%, up to a maximum of $3,000 per individual. We appreciate the governor including that in the budget. For our agency, that would be $27,176,955. Also, we have one or two employees, obviously, who fall under the teacher's retirement, so that's to reflect that increase of the just over 42,000. And then the adjustment, and all of these are statewide adjustments that you're going to see in all the budgets. And the next one there is a reduction to the Department of Administrative Services. And then the telecommunication piece for the Georgia Technology Authority, again, statewide adjustments. And then some transfer of some dollars from the Adult Developmental Disability Services to align with budget expenditures, and you'll see where that money's going within the budget here shortly. And then increased funds for merit system assessment of billings, again, statewide adjustment. And then increased funds for the Georgia Building Authority rental rates. Again, for the Capitol Police, we appreciate what they do, and these were dollars that were added by OPB and their statewide adjustments. So you've heard me talk for the last year about our biggest challenge, and our biggest challenge is workforce. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about workforce as we go through this budget presentation. First, just looking at where we've come from. We started out in FY22, we were at $56,000 for a registered nurse. And you know, during COVID, we lost a lot of employees as a department, and you all funded an FY23 pay package, which raised the salary up to $76,666. The FY24 pay package kept that rate the same. Just to show you what the 2023 DOAS market average is $86,000. You can see that for each of these positions, non-clinical, direct care, and licensed practical nurses. Some of our biggest challenged areas in our hospital system. We're a little unique to a lot of agencies, and as you know, because we really, the bulk of our employees are working in a hospital setting, so they're healthcare workers. So we're competing with the hospital in your community for employees, and it's a challenge for us. This just reemphasizes a little bit about where we've come from as far as during COVID. We lost 1,238 employees during COVID. And you can see there the pay packages that you've approved and the bump in the number of employees coming back. We've been able to fill 51% of the positions we lost since July 2022. That's good news. We still have work to do, but we're making progress, and that progress would not be possible without the support of this committee and the General Assembly funding those two pay packages, and we appreciate that, and our employees appreciate that. So here we're going to get into the adjustments by department that's proposed in the governor's budget. The first one is increased funds to annualize the 500 now comp waivers that you heard Darcy talk about a few minutes ago. That was in the current fiscal year budget. Those have to be annualized because we only asked for a portion of those in the year. So that would be the $9,377,000 that the governor's proposing. And then also in the governor's budget is to increase an additional 100 additional slots for now comp waivers at a cost of $2.3 million. And again, there'll be an additional cost for that in FY26, as that would have to be annualized. And like you heard Darcy say, we anticipate 400 individuals rolling off services. So we would be able, this 100 would allow us to enroll 500 new individuals into services, but a net gain of 100. And then the big one, which we are all extremely excited about, and we've all worked collectively with this body, the governor's office, and our advocacy community. This is a real game changer for our system, and that is the dollars needed to send the rate study up to CMS and get an approval. And Darcy already covered this, so I won't belabor the point, but these are the dollars outside the ARPA funds that are available to fully fund that rate study. This is the way we're going to be able to bring our provider network up to the place it needs to be, and this is one of the most important things that the state can do to move this forward. So thank you to the governor. Thank you for this committee working behind the scenes to ensure that this is in the budget, so thank you. And then the federal medical assistant percentage, that's just an adjustment that's based on the amount the feds pay versus the state. So this, just to recap how important this rate study is, this will result in about a 40% increase in provider reimbursement rates. You can see that the total is $107 million. The process is once this budget, and I'm saying once because I'm hopeful that this will be in the budget when it passes, once this budget's approved and the governor signs it, then that will allow DCH to be able to send this up to CMS at the federal level, and then we will be pushing with all the levers we have to push with CMS to approve this, get it implemented as quickly as we possibly can. Also, one of the things that I wanted to mention to you is we have really trying to take a holistic look at the IDD population and the services we provide. Ron Wakefield, who does a tremendous job in this area, and his staff formed an intellectual and developmental disabilities work group. They had their first meeting in September. There's an interim report that I anticipate. We put March to be safe, but that report actually should be out by the end of this month. We'll send you a copy of it. They've done a lot of work, and I believe, Darcy, if I'm not wrong, y'all actually had a meeting today. So they had a meeting today. We have a host of advocacy groups, providers, and others that are serving on that group and doing a good job bringing forward good ideas. Some of the key initiatives there is really to create solutions and strategies to eliminate the planning list. All of us know that if someone needs services, that we want to be able to provide those. We also want to look at the population that are stuck in emergency rooms, and we have individuals that fall into that category. And we also have individuals that are at such high need that there's no placement in Georgia, and those individuals are out of state currently at a pretty significant cost to the state, and it's all state funds. So really looking at that and really building up a resilient workforce. And this group recognizes the need to approve the rate study also. This is something I'm very proud of, and I know Chair Lady Dempsey and I were able to get a picture standing in the bucket of a front end loader at the groundbreaking there in Macon. This is the first crisis stabilization diagnostic center in the state. This is also a game changer for this system. This is a 16-bed inpatient facility. It's the first of its kind in Georgia, and really one of the first of its kind in the country. But this will get those folks from the emergency room into a facility, an inpatient facility, where we can really understand what's going on, both from an IDD perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a medical perspective. What services, what does this individual need? It'll be very individualized treatment. The other thing I'm proud of about this center is it will have a very robust outpatient facility. So individuals can come here from all around the state, receive services. The other thing that we're planning on doing is having a robust telehealth system here. So this will be very much about the whole person. And we're working closely with Mercer and Mercer Medical School to be able to help staff the outpatient facility here and to really make this a learning institute where people, students, medical students, residents can come, learn, and then when they go out all across Georgia into rural communities and communities around the state, they're going to have a knowledge that they wouldn't have had any other place. So we're really, really excited about this. And then this is for adult forensic services, increased funds to staff and operate the forensic step-down unit we're calling it Operation New Hope at Savannah. This is something else the department's excited about. I can tell you our hospital staff is excited about this at Savannah. This is currently under being remodeled now. It's going to be 30 beds, and it's the first what we call transition center within the state hospital. We have a lot of individuals in the state hospital who've been there a long time. We have quite a few people that's been there over 20 years. Clinically, our staff believes they're ready to get out, but the court's reluctant. So the idea here is we'll identify the people we think have the potential to be most successful, and we'll be able to move them into this program with the court's permission, and they'll go through a program where they'll learn life skills, financial management. They may be able to go out to a technical college, learn a trade, ultimately be able to get out and go get a job, come back at night, and then ultimately work their way out into the community. So our staff at Savannah, the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, they light up when they talk about this program, because many of our staff have been there for a long time, and they've saw these individuals come through their recovery process, and they really want to give them a chance to be successful outside the walls of the hospital. So one of the things that is important, and why that program's important, we just talked about, if you haven't gotten a phone call from a sheriff complaining about somebody being stuck in the jail, then you're the lucky ones, because I get a lot of them, and they have a right to be concerned. We've had a 229% increase in the wait list for people waiting on a hospital bed since April 2020. We have 607 individuals waiting in a jail to come into the hospital system. On average, it takes 275 days from the time we receive the order to actually get a bed in the hospital. Now, this is challenging for us for several reasons, but one of the reasons is we only have 641 forensic beds in the entire state of Georgia, in the entire hospital system. Half of those beds are taken up by individuals who are ordered there not guilty by reason of insanity. So that individual could have committed murder, something else, but the courts determine they're not guilty by reason of insanity. On average, those individuals who are currently in our system have been there on average 9 years. They're not going anywhere. So that means I only have just over 300 beds for forensic restoration, and I've got 607 people waiting. The numbers just don't work. So we have tried to look at what can we do. We formed a forensic work group. We're very proud of that group. Judge Goslin, who's a Chief Superior Court judge in the Hall County Circuit, been on the bench since 1987, chaired that group, has 3 Superior Court judges, 2 state court, 2 probate court, 2 juvenile court, 2 prosecutors, 2 defense attorneys, and 3 forensic experts. And they've come back with a lot of good recommendations. We've also looked at expanding our community-based restoration for individuals who are in jail that are low acuity and they're nonviolent crimes. And then we've started several jail in-reach pilot programs, which we've talked with you about before. We've also stood up jail-based restoration, and I've talked about that during the subcommittee's work on the amended budget. We have one in Cobb, we have one down in Chatham County that's just stood up, and we're hoping to stand one up in Dodge, and you all put some dollars in the amended budget to start that program. That would be a 30-bed jail-based restoration program in Dodge County. And we appreciate Representative Danny Mathis and Senator Larry Walker for actually bringing that idea to us because it's a DJJ facility that they had moved out of, and it's perfect for what we need. And then Operation New Hope, and then the expanded evaluators that we've got. And this goes into that. We were up to an all-time high in adults waiting on an evaluation. So most of you probably know this, but if someone's in jail or someone has a criminal case and the attorney raises an issue to the judge and says, Kevin needs an evaluation, I think Kevin may have a mental illness, then the judge can issue an order for us to do an evaluation. That requires a forensic psychologist to do the evaluation. We were up to almost 1,400 individuals on the wait list for that. So we put a whole lot of things in place to try to get a handle on that, and that number's now dropped down. It stays between 900 and 1,008 or so. So that number's coming down, and we're thankful for that. But at the same time, the other side's going up. That 600's going up. On average, everyone who's evaluated, about 67% of them are found to be competent. So that means the 1,000 people we have there, you can guess that about 330 or so of those are going to be found incompetent, and they're going to be ordered to the state hospital. I won't go back over this. This is the Operation New Hope that we already talked about. And then going into the adult mental health piece, increased funds for the new Behavioral Health Crisis Center. This would be a new crisis center here in the state. It would be based on our bed study that we conducted. And then reduce funds for demand on core adult mental health services. We were asked to take a 1% cut by the governor when we were proposing our budget, so this is where those dollars are coming from. This will not affect our current service level. A lot of this has to do with the fact that our crisis centers also were having staffing issues, and as a result of that, they were just not able to serve as many people. Increased funds to annualize the Fulton County BHCC. I know Fulton County's here to speak on that, but there's just under $3.8 million in the governor's budget for that. And then you see the other two that you funded last year, one being in Dublin and one being in Augusta. I will tell you, Fulton County's on a fast pace to get open over the next few months this year, and the other two we anticipate late 2025. So those are underway and they're under construction, so we're excited about that. And then there was some one-time funds in the budget for homelessness in the Atlanta area, $825,000 that OPB has eliminated in its budget proposal. And then we already mentioned same situation here with the difference between the rate the feds pay versus the state in the federal medical assistance percentage. And then the community behavioral health rehabilitation services, this is for the uninsured. This is to implement the behavioral health rate study. So we're excited about that also. Just like the IDD rate study is important, the behavioral health rate study is equally important. Rates have not been increased in the behavioral health side since 2008. As you know, inflation's changed since 2008. We anticipate that we will see up to 35 to 40% increase, and you see the total cost there is $44 million. We're going to utilize some American Rescue Plan dollars to make up the difference in this budget. It's asking for $22 million from the governor. And again, this is following the same process. If this is approved, it would go to DCH and then to CMS. We went, going back to the bed capacity, which I think is important for you to understand. We're making our decisions on the number of beds we need based on data. We had an outside group come in and conduct a very in-depth study. It shows we need 8 additional crisis centers by the end of in 10 years. 5 of those by the end of 25, which is probably not going to happen. But I think we will be on track to be able to meet that 8 in 10 years. And it laid out where those generally needed to be in the state. The other thing is it showed we had a statewide gap of forensic beds of 119 beds. Obviously, with the numbers we're seeing on people waiting in jail, that tracks well. And we already mentioned about the average length of stay. So 988 is, you all are familiar with that, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I will tell you, Patrick put these up here. We've got these are tractors that's been given out at our Faith and Farm forums that we're doing around the state. We have a disproportionate number of people in rural Georgia committing suicide. We have a disproportionate number of farmers that commit suicide, and we are concerned about that, and we have a laser focus on that as a department. But only 16% of Georgians have heard of 988 and actually know what it is. So we appreciate you supporting getting the word out to people, because people who need that can call it 24/7. We're averaging 5,000 calls a week right now, 20,000 calls a month. And again, I mentioned that we're targeting some of our targeted populations. We didn't have any because they're all out in restaurants, but we have 40 restaurants participating in the initial rollout of our hashtag 86 the stigma. We're excited about that. They have Sharpies, they have shirts, they have hats they're wearing in these restaurants from Atlanta to Savannah. And that, because restaurant workers are actually the second highest number of suicides, overdoses, and some other things in the state. So we wanted to target that population. And our team came up with this idea. But ultimately, the Restaurant Worker Association says this will be a national campaign. So we're excited about the partnership between this group in Georgia and our staff at the department. And this is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, eliminate one-time funds for the PRTF, and those dollars are have been handled in a different way now. This is just a one-time request. Those dollars are no longer needed, and reduce funds to reflect technology savings. That was part of that 1% cut. Brandon Kinney, our Assistant Commissioner of Operations, working closely with our IT Director, Jason, have been able to really create some savings within our department, and they've been able to offer that up as part of that cut. So I want to share in closing before I open it up for questions. I just want to share a very brief ad that we did with targeting the farm population. Well, I have to get my main guy up here. Oops.
My name is Marshall Sewell, and I am a fifth-generation farmer. Unfortunately, lost my dad to suicide after we had.
I tell you what, while we let him work on that, if there's any questions, could I go ahead and answer those, Madam Chair?
Absolutely. The first is from Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. How you doing, my friend?
I love your jacket.
Thank you. I've had about 100 people tell me that, and 6 people came up and said I could sell cars like Butch Miller. But I know it. I do appreciate it. I apologize for being late. I had people after session in my office that I had to meet with, and I do apologize for that. Just a few questions. The hospital workforce, you said the number was what that you lost?
We lost just over 1,200 employees. We've gained back about 51% of those.
Okay, 51%. Now, with that, was it mandatory COVID vaccines that a lot of them left, or why did they leave?
No, sir. They left because the state pays an RN. During COVID, the rates that hospitals were paying just skyrocketed. We just couldn't compete financially. So during exit interviews, et cetera, it was almost overwhelmingly paid.
Good deal. And I appreciate the exit interview. You learn a lot when you take that time to do that. The other part is the crisis center. What's the cost on that? What is that going to be? I see the pretty picture here, but what's the cost on that?
Well, we have the dollars already in the budget to build it. Except I think we're about and I've got my exact number, but it's around 1.7 million that we would be short to fully operationalize those dollars, and then an additional amount to do the outpatient center of around $1.4 million. So the rest of the cost is already built into the budget. Y'all actually funded that, I believe, and Madam Chair can correct me if I'm wrong, in the FY22 or 23 budget. So there may be a question, why is it taking so long? And that's a good question. This is the first one of its kind. So our staff, and Mercedes is our point person on this for the department, has really worked hard to get it right. We've done a lot of BHCCs in the state, so we've got a lot of experience doing that. This is the first one of its kind. So the dollars are allocated to build it, but to fully operationalize it, we need around 1.7 and 1.4 million to do both the operational side of the inpatient and the outpatient piece.
Thank you. And a couple more, and I apologize. I do appreciate it. I just never like to assume stuff. We had a magnificent place back years ago called Milledgeville, and the hospital there I toured probably 10 years ago. Just curious, what would it bring cost-wise to make that functional again?
Well, we have a facility at Central State. The buildings that exist there they've either been sold by the state over the years
Right.
or given to the redevelopment authority, which that was something
My name
that
is
the
Marshall Sewell.
General Assembly did, or they are in such poor condition that they need to be either torn down or something done to the building. So it would be cost prohibitive to try to utilize any of the old buildings that the state still owns there. We've looked at that.
Right.
And we've tried to get others to look at those buildings, but it's not, they're not able to be used.
Thank you.
Representative Anulowicz.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Thank you again for talking about the program we have in Cobb County. It has been a success. My understanding is that it's the Georgia Rise program, and I know that 18 counties have residents who have participated in this program. So this is something where the reach is extending and the impact is extending way beyond Cobb. What are the opportunities that we have here in this budget to expand capacity?
There are no monies in the budget before you to expand Cobb. I will tell you, Cobb has approached us and about expanding it by 10 additional individuals. So they're open to that idea. There's not dollars in the budget specifically for that.
Okay, that is helpful. And then the next thing, we touched on this a little bit, I think, but with the housing voucher programs, I know there's probably a need for growth in there. Is that something that we can talk more about also?
Yeah, the Georgia Housing Voucher, as you know, was set up as part of the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice, and that grew slowly over time. I will tell you, recently it started growing at a faster click. Part of that is because we have Maxwell, who does a tremendous job in that program, and he runs that program for us. We also are doing a good job of getting into the jails and getting into the prison system and making sure that people who have a serious persistent mental illness, who qualify, who are unhoused, know about the program and have an opportunity to sign up, which is part of what the settlement agreement requires. So it has had growth, and it will obviously need additional funding to continue to be able to grow. And we can have some additional conversations about that. The other thing we're working on too, I will tell you, and I know I saw one of our partners in Atlanta here, we're working on looking at all available options too, because the choice voucher, which is a HUD voucher program, we want to be able to create an opportunity to, when it's appropriate, to transition some people over to that voucher. We'll probably have to continue to provide the wraparound services necessary to help them be successful. But that is a federally funded program. DCA administers that in most parts of the state. In the larger metro area like Atlanta, then they have a separate authority. So we're working closely with Atlanta, and we're working closely with Christopher Nunn, Commissioner Nunn, and his staff, looking at other alternatives too.
Thank you. And I actually was at a restaurant last week, and the wait staff had on the 86 The Stigma
that's
shirts.
great.
And I was glad to see the Giving Kitchen is involved with that also. They're a natural partner for that.
Big partner. Thank you. Glad you saw that.
That's great. I haven't been anywhere where I've seen those T-shirts, but I want to. Great. Okay, and next, Representative Sainz.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that your team is leading on. Just a quick clarification. What rate did you say that Georgians are knowledgeable of 988? You said a percentage, but I didn't catch it.
The people who have actually both heard of it and actually understand what it is 16%.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Is that in line with other states?
I'm not 100% certain if there's been any national surveys. That particular poll was commissioned by us, our department. We've received federal dollars to do marketing, and we wanted to try to target and where we needed to do that marketing, and also to measure the results, so before and after. So that was a flat line that we got in the beginning, and it was 16%, which we were a little surprised about because we talk a lot about it, but people just don't really understand. And it tracks because I speak at a lot of civic organizations, and I'll ask for a show of hands, and a very small number typically raise their hand to know what it is.
Well, thank you for not only talking about it a lot, but also making that measurement and making that a priority.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, just before you do that, the date that we think the IDD Crisis Center will open up in Macon, just the projected date right now?
We're hoping January of 25.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, just around a year from now, roughly.
Great. Well, if this is ready, let's do it. Let's see this.
All right, she got it ready, and I hope I don't screw it up.
My name is Marshall Sewell, and I am a fifth-generation farmer. Unfortunately, lost my dad to suicide after we had a farm-related disaster. My family continues to farm, and now we're also trying to help raise awareness for farm stress and farmer suicide.
I'm Georgia First Lady Marty Kemp. If you're thinking about suicide or worried about a loved one or would like emotional support, help is available 24/7. Call or text 988. I'm here to tell you it's okay to not be okay. There is hope.
And we appreciate the First Lady doing those for us. I think it's going to have a real impact as we continue to push those out across the state.
That's great. I know we saw another one in the house that was not farm, but it was really good.
Commissioner Tanner, we are here today to celebrate a milestone.
Mr. Tanner!
1 year since we got.
So, and I want to say thank you. We all have our little stress tractor here. That is pretty powerful. So thank you so much, Commissioner. I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, good. Now we want to hear from the Sexual Offender Risk Review Board, SORB. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I really appreciate you allowing me to speak. This is the first time, so I'm really excited about it and nervous, but I really appreciate it and hope I can give you some insight into our agency. I want to thank you too, Amber, for all the great communication you always give me. I would like to introduce some of those who are part of the agency that do really all the hard work. The chair of my board is Frank Mullis. I think most of you know Bert Reeves, who is on my board. Russ Finley is my chief investigator, and Amanda Ayton is one of my clinical evaluators. To kind of give you an idea as we talk about it, and I can kind of give you more insight into how we do things. Okay. So when we think about sex offenders, which most people don't really like to talk about sex offenders, so it even feels weird talking about it after all these different conversations and discussing this population. I think most people think that they're in prison, that they get sentenced, they're in prison, we don't really have to worry about them anymore, and unfortunately that's not the case. People would probably be surprised how many sex offenders are in our community, and based on the current Georgia sex offender registry, there's 29,000 sex offenders who are walking our streets. And the important part of that is we're looking at public safety, which is why the registry was created to begin with, is to protect our communities so everybody was aware of who's out there and who lives next to us. And so for SORB, we want to make sure that those who are in our communities are not going to reoffend. And so how do we do that? So when when somebody commits a sexual offense, they get sentenced, they go to prison or they don't go to prison, they come in the community. What do we do after that to ensure that this person doesn't do it again? Because we know that the risk recidivism of certain sex offenders can be very, very high. So what do we do about that? And the experts really look at the containment model within the community. And when we have 29,000 sex offenders in Georgia alone, we really don't have personnel in the whole state of Georgia, whether it's the Sheriff's Department, Department of Community Supervision, to watch over 29,000 people in the same exact way. And we know that, based on research, not all sex offenders are created equal. And we're fortunate in that, because if they were, there just would not be enough people to watch them all, and the epidemic we have on sexual abuse would be even worse than it already is. SORB is definitely a sexual abuse prevention agency. Our goal is to prevent sexual abuse. And so we conduct classifications. And to go through, to give you an idea, when the Adam Walsh Act was passed, they created the classification process. And the goal of that was to identify the highest risk sex offenders. Who is the highest risk? Where should we put our resources towards? And to do that, Georgia put together a great process, and that is through the review of all the information that you can get on a sex offender. So I'm going to give you an example. And I'm sorry, I'm not good with pages. Slide 6. Just to give you an example of one sex offender criminal history. So the very first thing that we do is we pull their criminal history, both national and Georgia. And this is one sex offender's criminal history, and you can see he has multiple sexual offense convictions. And you can also see that this individual has been out multiple times to commit those various sexual offenses. Not only has he committed sexual offenses, he's committed violent crimes, as well as other crimes that are part of risk. So we don't only look at or pull information on their sex crime. So our goal is, what is all the empirically researched information that allows us to make the best determination to help our law enforcement, to help DCS, to help the sheriff's departments best monitor these individuals. And one is pulling all the risk-related dynamic factors from the criminal history. So that's what my investigators do. They pull all of this information. After all this information is gathered, and again, this is just one example of this individual, then my evaluators have this information. And all my evaluators are experts in sex offender behavior and risk. That is not easy to come by because it's a very specialized population, so they know a significant amount about sex offenders. We definitely want them to have the knowledge that they need to have to identify the factors that need to be identified to say if this guy is a predator, is this guy level 2, or is this guy level 1? And so the things that they look at, aside from the criminal history, is they're looking at their prison behavior. So there's a lot of things that these guys do in prison that are sex crimes. And typically, prisons do not convict them on new sex crimes. They usually give them a disciplinary report. But we have that information, and that's considered a sex crime regardless if they prosecute them for a sex crime. So we look at that information. When they get in the community, we're looking at the Department of Community Supervision behavior. And so there's loads of factors that factor into a person's risk. So whether they are looking at pornography, or they're engaging in sexually preoccupied behavior, or they're around children that they're not supposed to be, then that lets us know additional information. So they're looking at all that. They're looking at their treatment records. So is this individual compliant with probation? Are they compliant with treatment? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? So we can put all this information together. It's very intensive. We want to make sure we get it as right as we possibly can get it right to protect the community as best that we can protect the community and provide those resources to our law enforcement. Once the report is completed, then they made a determination on risk. And so when you think about Department of Community Supervision and the Sheriff's Departments, so for example, a Department of Community Supervision officer may have 40 to 60 sex offenders on their caseload. And they have 40 hours within a week to do all the things that they have to do. And when we don't have individuals leveled, then they don't really know which ones should they spend more time with than other ones. We had a case not too long ago who the individual had 3 separate sex offense convictions. He had not been leveled yet. He was being permitted to be a courier, so he was transporting materials and mail and different things to different agencies, such as schools, such as residences, And so we were able to classify him, make him a predator, put a monitor on his ankle, and he's no longer a courier for those places. And so this information was very helpful to the DCS officer. We frequently have calls from DCS and the sheriff's departments to say, Tracy, can you classify this guy because we're concerned? We need to know how to monitor them. The issue that we have is we get approximately 132 new sex offenders every single month that are new to our system. Approximately 1,700 new cases are registered every single year. So the numbers are growing for sex offenders in every state, not just Georgia. And so being able to know who to monitor the best is what we really want to do to ensure that we're decreasing risk. We're only at our capacity that we have. Currently at our capacity with our budget is we are only able to classify approximately 50% of the cases we get every month. We get 132 new people. We get approximately between 35 to 55 new sex offenders from out of state moving into Georgia every single month. And it is a significant problem. And we're getting several that have a lot of different sex offenses that we're not aware of because we're not able to get through all these cases. And so when we're only able to do 50%, what happens is that other 50% goes back to the backlog, which a backlog was created from the very beginning when SOAR was developed, and of course over time, because the numbers haven't changed much in reference to how many personnel that I have to be able to classify these guys. And so our backlog is approximately 7,000 sex offenders that really need to be classified. And when you think about approximately 10% of the sex offenders we classify are predators. So we're looking at about 700 predators that are not being classified at this moment. Now, level 2 sex offenders are moderately at risk. Those are also really dangerous sex offenders. So we have about 35% are level 2 sex offenders. And what that really means is they're on the border of becoming a predator. And so those are the two main cases, types of cases that we need to address. People don't realize that sex offenders might have proximity and they can't live near a church, but they can go to a church. Sex offenders might not be able to live near a playground, but they can live next door to children. And so there's a lot of these factors that with us not really knowing, they could be living next to you, you not knowing it, not knowing he's a predator or whether he's a 1 or whether he's a 2 to help manage that. But definitely our law enforcement are needing guidance on how to best supervise these guys so that we can reduce recidivism as much as possible. Our goal is public safety, reducing recidivism once they're back in the community. To kind of give you an idea of what things would look like if we were able to get additional funding is at the top portion of this particular slide, the top piece with 5 admins, 6 investigators, and 9 evaluators, that would allow us to complete the 132 cases every month to ensure that we didn't create additional backlog. So that would keep us kind of in line with what we need to do with all the new sex offenders coming in to our office. The second half is in order to get rid of the backlog. In about 6 years, if we had that additional staff and that additional funding, we would be able to get rid of the backlog, and then we could reduce that staff and reduce that funding. So that is, the hope that we have is because our goal is to eradicate the cases that have not been leveled and make sure that we know every single person's been leveled. We know all those that are predators that need to be strongly supervised and have a monitor on their ankle. And I can give you another example. I've had 3 cases just from officers that I tend to work closely with. I actually have a private office in Walker County. I have a private office in Floyd County. I live in Cobb County. And so definitely see a lot of these cases where an individual was designated as a predator and they were able to locate him based on allegations because of his monitor. There was a guy who got out of prison. He had a monitor on his ankle because he was designated as a predator. He did not report to probation. They were able to track him. They tracked him to a store where a lot of offenses tend to happen. And it was a regular store that everybody goes to. And they found him with a camera or with a cell phone that he had just purchased, getting out of prison, and was upskirting individuals at this particular store. But they caught him immediately. It didn't deter him, unfortunately. He just got out of prison. You think he would want to behave, but he obviously has a major, major problem, which is why we identified him, and he's a predator. And they were able to catch him because he had the monitor on his ankle. When they have a monitor on the ankle, then we can't catch him as easily as in a lot of cases that we have. The governor, who I am so grateful to because he's recommended 2 additional full-time evaluators, which is huge for us because we have not had that recommendation in the past. So I'm really grateful that that has been a recommendation, as well as the 4%, because keeping my staff is really important. They're all experts in the field. It's hard to keep people like that who are so good. And so everything that he is offering to add, I'm very, very grateful for. To have that. It will not eradicate our backlog, and it will still continue to add to the backlog, unfortunately. I did want to show you just kind of what things look like when it comes to the 3 different, like where we are now, where we would be with the additional 2 evaluators, and then what it would look like with what I'm requesting. And you can see how unfortunately, our backlog just continues to grow until we actually have sufficient staff to make this happen for us. So I did want to share with the different counties what it looks like. So for Rome, just for an example, we've assessed 115 sex offenders out of Rome, and 10 of which are predators, which is about 9% of those we assessed out of Rome. But 188 go unassessed. And if we look at the trends, probably at least an additional 17 will be predators that haven't been identified. And I don't need to go through all those because I know y'all can read and you can kind of see those different numbers. But I think they're pretty impactful in the sense of with them just sitting there not being classified and not being able to be monitored. And I'll tell you, Walker County, Floyd County, Cobb County have great DCS officers. They're so good at their jobs, and we're really grateful to that. And this would help them with their job. One of the biggest obvious counties is Fulton County, being the largest county, but we have 1,592 that haven't even been classified out of Fulton County. So the last slide, I just want to kind of give you an idea of what we try to do, and we haven't been able to get through all of them, but we try to do a criminal history the minute we get a case in to identify if they have more than 1 sex offense. Because if they have more than 1 sex offense, they're likely a predator. And every county on here that has a dot on it, they have at least 1, and probably a lot more, that have at least 1 sex offense conviction. So those are likely all predators that are sitting there that we have not been able to classify. So again, just to reiterate, we are all about prevention and trying to minimize recidivism with this group. And that is it for me.
Representative Cameron.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I didn't recognize the number for just a minute. Sorry. Thank you.
I should have held up the numbers myself.
Okay. No.
I just want to thank you for having an office in Walker County. I represent Walker County and Dade County, and I understand the need. Because also I have a bill in the Senate we hope to get over the hump in the next few weeks. It's a bill to change the incest law in Georgia to include step-grandchildren because there was a case last year that could not be prosecuted. So we're hoping to put some more teeth in the law to do that. But thank you for your efforts.
Well, and I appreciate that. I think that's a wonderful thing that you're doing. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? Well, first of all, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I know this is very hard work. We've got a question here coming up. Representative Nolowitz.
Very chatty today. No, what I'm seeing here, and I appreciate the statistics, because it seems like the reality is that the backlog is going to just continue to increase.
Correct.
And that's going to result in a lack of knowledge about what it is we're dealing with.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
Okay.
I mean, in the knowledge, there's so much we can do with that, not just the law enforcement, but treatment providers, and even with the courts. We get, a lot of times, we've been really fortunate. The courts have gotten more and more knowledgeable about SORB, and so they'll have a case where they're coming to be removed from the registry, and they'll petition us to look at them again to make sure that we haven't missed anything or there hasn't been something new since we had classified them. So it's been a really good process.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you about Miriam's Law that we passed as a body in the 23 session, so very recently. How has that impacted your workload?
So I think it's twofold. I think one is it's reduced my anxiety about predators walking around without being classified. So one thing it gave opportunity to is if an individual has two separate sex offense convictions, then they need a monitor on their ankle if they're under supervision. So I'm grateful for that, because that kind of reduces, my fear of we're missing this person, he's going to do something so horrible. The other part of it is that in the previous law, there were certain nuances where we could not level someone without a court order. And so that actually reduced our numbers. However, with Miriam's Law, we can now classify everybody. And so now we have 29,000 on the run. Now we've classified a bunch of people, of course, but that substantially increases. And actually each law increases the number of cases that we need to do. Because the other part of Miriam's Law was an individual who is classified as a tour predator. They had previously been permitted to request reevaluation after 10 years. And we would look at the case again. And what Miriam's Law does is it allows them to be classified every 10 years thereafter, and then every 5 years thereafter. So what that means is that individual can continue to be classified, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. So it does increase. But there's a lot of good things that came from that law. I'm so grateful for it.
Well, good. I'm glad. Yes. Representative, punch. Can you punch it? There, punch it. There we go. Representative
I think it
Mayfield.
caught. Yeah, I think it did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Can you give me an idea of counselors? What do they do? Who's testing? Is it psychologists, psychiatrists? Can you kind of give me an idea of how that works?
Absolutely. So the researchers created there's different aspects to determining risk, and there's no testing that's involved. So, for example, personality testing has nothing to do with sex offending recidivism. So there's really no test you can give a sex offender. What we do is once somebody's convicted of a sex offense, then we're looking at different factors to determine, do they hold those factors that are similar to those who tend to reoffend? And there is empirically derived risk assessments. One's called the STAC 99, one's the 2002, and we put those together for incremental validity. That creates our baseline, and they score it. So, for example, if somebody has a male victim, they're higher risk to reoffend. If somebody has a stranger victim, they're higher risk to reoffend. If they have two prepubescent victims, they're higher risk to reoffend. So there's all those different factors. So that's kind of our baseline. Then we have dynamic risk factors, and those are factors that change over time. And so what they're looking for in the DCS notes and the prison notes and the treatment notes is this individual engaging in high-risk behavior that would be suggestive of likelihood of reoffending. So, for example, if you have an individual who has proximity to children, especially children within their age of interest, we know that person is probably higher risk to reoffend, especially if people are giving them access. So that would just kind of be one example of many that we look at. And the individuals who do this work, they all have extensive sex offender experience. For Amanda, for example, has over 20 years of experience working with sex offenders. I have over 30 years of experience working with sex offenders. And my other staff who does it, all of them have 20 plus years. We don't have people like that all the time, but what I do is I typically go for those counselors who, with degrees, master's degree is my preference, because you actually can be a probation officer and do these scorings with this. It was created for that reason by the researchers so that because they're the ones monitoring them. So we want to give them the ability to do that. They don't really do that because it's really hard to do. And so I do bring DCS officers who have had a sex offender caseload for years in as evaluators as well, because they know the population. I've tried to bring in counselors who've never worked with sex offenders before. It's very difficult to really train people who don't have that base knowledge. So, but most of my evaluators are master's level counselors.
Can I have one more question? What's the percentage of men and women? Are there
Sex
women's?
offenders?
Yes.
Such a great question. So just to give you an example, so I've been in the field for 30 years where I directly have worked with sex offenders in addition to, I became the director here in 2010. And over the years, I've worked with thousands and thousands of men. And in my practice, I probably have worked with a total of 12 women. That doesn't mean that there's not a higher percentage. It's much, much less than men. The recidivism rates are significantly less than men based on the research. And women actually tend to go to prison depending on the type of female offender, right? So if we have a attractive female, she doesn't get prosecuted. If we have an unattractive female, she'll get prosecuted and go to prison. It's kind of this weird situation, but there's definitely more females out there than we're aware of, number one, but number two, more than that have not been prosecuted or they're doing their whole time in prison. So it's a very small number. I don't know the exact number, but it's significantly smaller than men.
Thank you so much.
And I can say, just to add, interesting piece, we've never had a female predator. So I'm waiting on that day to see that happen. I know that they're there, which is a scary thing, but just not as many. But it is interesting. Of those we classified, we don't have any female predators.
Representative Donohue.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Is that fact or hearsay, and I'm just not going to assume that if they're an attractive female, how do we know they're not prosecuted, and if they're not, they are?
So let me rephrase that. They're prosecuted, but with much more leniency. And just for an example, I currently have a female teacher that I'm working with, and although all my male clients are not permitted to go to any kind of games, such as football games or whatever, her victims were teenage boys, she's allowed to go to all the games because she has teenage boys. When I was doing research on female sex offenders several years back, when I first brought up, I was looking for female sex offenders, the first thing that came up in Google was the most attractive female sex offenders on the Texas registry. So it definitely has an impact on how the females are treated compared to men and how they're treated.
Is this the judges that are doing this, or?
No, you see it with juries as well. I actually went to a jury trial many years ago, and again, she was a female teacher. Her victim was actually her daughter, and they really struggled, and they ended up giving her, again, it was a case that you could see if it was a male that was on trial, he would have gotten serious prison time. They did finally convict her of 3 misdemeanors.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you were able to come and present to us. This has been very, very informative, and certainly we see the huge needs.
I cannot thank you enough for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here and for bringing friends with you. So,
yes,
thank you so much. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Right. Next, we have a mother who's asked to speak because she's been here all day long. Sounds like since lunchtime, and I just appreciate you hanging in with us. So how about, would you rather sit or do you want to stand? You'll stand, okay? Well, that would be great, and it's Muriel. And Muriel, I can't read your last name because I'm going to get you to introduce yourself to us, okay, please?
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Muriel Ayanaba, and I'm the mother of Janvia Ayanaba, who is a 47-year-old, I think very handsome and fun man. However, he does have developmental disabilities as a result of having a congenital disease that affects all of his organs, or most of his organs. But that also that disease has a wide spectrum there are many people walking around who are very high performing, and no one would ever know it, but they may give it to their children, depending on how they acquired the disease in the first place. So every one of these presentations and anything having to do with health and education are very dear to my heart because they affect him. It's not just one thing. And as a result of having the involvement in his brain, he has a lot of, shall I say, deficits in terms of his intellectual functioning and his behavior. So I am very happy to see the opening up of the waivers. We waited, when we came, we were told, in Georgia, you wait 7 years, and I said, well, we won't, because right away he was, from when we moved from California, he already had had a waiver for 10 years, so right away they said he was eligible, but they did make us wait 7 years. And I think one of the barriers that hasn't been mentioned is you don't turn in your own paperwork to the state to make those requests. You go through an agency, a vendor. And it was 7 years before they finally said, okay, I think we might be able to get one for you. And I was I'm in my 70s, so I'm in declining health. And I just couldn't keep up with him and me and all the other responsibilities. And I think that when he is in a group home, which is at this point seems to be the most appropriate thing for him, he thrives. It just doesn't make him a nice, calm, obedient person all the time. He's still himself, but he knows how to socialize with others, to go along with schedules, to listen and learning new things, to picking up, and he has a real problem being able to make himself understood, but he can understand a lot of things. And it creates the situation in which he makes the effort to make himself understood and to broaden the vocabulary that he actually needs. At one point, many years ago, he was able to, when he was a teenager, he was able to actually work and had mobility training and all of those things, but at this point, that's not what he needs. So as much as I really, really, really want to advocate for waivers for as many people as it can help, I also understand that there needs to be a continuum of services. And I think in California, where we were before, there was this big push to take the money from the large institutions, which were not appropriate for many people, and put it all into community. And I think that as people change, with time, you can be someone who all of a sudden has a brain injury and has to have a lot more care than they would have had, a few years ago, like those of us who are aging, right? So I really want to encourage you as much as possible that the little bit of money that sometimes we tend to say we have a surplus and we're going to, take that money back or not keep it going. The little bit that the average taxpayer gets back is not going to make the slightest bit of difference, or it's not going to make a big difference in their lives because, of course, those of us who are comfortable can afford to say it's not going to make a really big difference, but it's not going to make a significant difference. And it's not in the interest of all of us because whether someone is going to, is homeless or is going to prison or is committing crime, we have to live with them within a few years, and we want them to be in this position to have something. I want to thank the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health, whatever. I would like to thank them a lot because they have been responsive, and I am so impressed by the level of professionalism that I have met there. They are working with what we give them. And all of the education they do for parents is excellent. And I'm assuming they're doing the same thing for staff. I have to say that since COVID has kind of abated somewhat, there is a lot more training of the personal staff. That's the other thing that we're talking about, wages. There's no reason why someone who is going to work every day, working with people with so many needs, should have been making $24,000 a year. The $40,000 is sort of getting into something that they deserve. But along with that, they need infrastructure, they need supports, they need continuous training, and I am hoping that this opening up of things for both behavior and all the other points that we've been mentioning today will be a building up of the infrastructure, because we know that just moving people out of institutions or out of their parents' home or out of prison, okay, so now they're here. What are we going to do with them? We don't have the capacity for the people we have now. And so part of what we need to do is to build our workforce, train them so they train the people who come with them and after them, and that there's institutional memory, and so that the agencies actually know what they're working with, because I know how government funds things. You should have it, but it's not there at the beginning of the fiscal year, and maybe after 6 months, and then it's gone, and that sort of thing. So that, to the extent that you can build that into any of the allocations that you recommend and push the administrative branch on it also, would be very much appreciated. I thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for staying all day long to tell your story about your son. We appreciate you. Hope you have a safe trip home. Okay, next, the Georgia Department of Veterans Services. I know. Commissioner Ross, I'm sure you've been here a long time as well. Thank you.
Thank y'all. I definitely appreciate y'all's endurance today because I was watching your session. So, as always, it is my honor to stand here before you, and thank you for your graciousness as a subcommittee. I appreciate everything that you've done for us in the recommended amended FY budget, and now, of course, we get to talk about 25. And I know Amber sent me a lot of questions, so I'm going to spend the majority of my comments talking about those things she identified that y'all would like to know more about. And so we'll quickly go through the budget. So page 11, we're section 48 on your tracking sheet. Just like every other agency, of course, we have some additions through the governor and through OPB for some statewide adjustments. Our departmental administration, which is one of our 4 programs, you can see our big adjustments are for those statewide initiatives. And then, of course, y'all have already addressed in the amended budget the reduction for our 1 vacancy that's in the admin program. Again, it's a small program. I know y'all gave that back to us when it went to the Senate subcommittee, so we're hoping that that makes it through the amended budget. We would also ask you to consider that also for the FY25. That does give us flexibility. For instance, just this week alone, we found out our software costs that allow us to submit benefit claims on behalf of our veterans. That cost has gone up. This is the funding we use to be able to afford that without coming back to you for more money. For our second program, our cemeteries, you can see that based on the governor's adjustment, those are all statewide adjustments in that program, so nothing significant to speak about there. Our nursing homes, our 2 nursing homes, same thing, statewide adjustments. I do want to point out that, of course, we have a little bit of a difference here in our homes. Augusta University, as y'all know, runs our Augusta home, and so we have the increase for TRS as well as health insurance that goes towards those state employees that, because we have a contract in our Milledgeville home, we do not have that for them. And then you can see that I also put the federal funding to show that not quite a 50-50 split. We do get a lot of federal funding to run both of our homes. Looking at our Veterans Benefits Program, which is the majority of our staff, the two changes was the addition down at the bottom, 48.4.6. That is an increase in 2 positions to go with a Houston County VA mega clinic that is opening up this summer. As always, we try to partner with the VA to make that easier for our veterans to receive benefits and for us to get their medical paperwork to be able to submit those claims. That is a huge need there in that Central Georgia region, and so we do have the positions in there for Houston County, but it did take a reduction in our appeals division. I will tell you that does not affect us right now, but in 6 months it will. So that's 2 positions in appeals. What has happened with the VA, they've focused over the last couple of years on legacy appeals, so those older appeals to get through that backlog. We didn't have very many in Georgia. We had already worked through those. But now they're coming up to the newer appeals, which is under the Modernization Act. And so our workload is going up. And so we anticipate in the next 6 months, we'll actually need those people when we had identified those in the 1% cut that we were asked to look at. So our overall budget, you can see that state budget is just over $28 million with all of the statewide adjustments as well as those reductions. And then with our federal funds, we're just sitting at about $55 million. Again, primarily federal funds come in our homes and our cemeteries. So let's talk about what y'all wanted to talk about. War Veterans Homes. So this is our Milledgeville home. You can kind of see the diagram in front of you. Just to give you a little bit of history, we were given that you see that X-shaped building, that the Wheeler building is what it is called now. That was built in 1902. We were given it in 1955. So that was done by the General Assembly, established the first war veterans home for the state. And we have added additional buildings onto it. That's a brand new sign in our directory in the kind of magenta color. Those are our recent additions. This past fall, we opened up the new kitchen facility. So we are able to actually do preparation of meals on site, which we never could do before. And then I know we'll talk about that transitional support unit. And red is kind of what we're projecting. So the transitional support unit is 14 beds. We do have plans to expand that by another 14 beds. And then also later on, we have a 28 bed, that small cottage VA small home model also on the campus, but that's future years construction funding. So we'll go through kind of all of those buildings, and so you can see what state dollars have done in combination with federal funds and where we're currently sitting in Milledgeville. Okay, so we have 5 additional buildings that we've gotten since that initial, what is now the Wheeler building. You can see our Vincent building currently undergoing ADA renovations. That was sitting at about 86 beds. We're going down to 48. ADA renovations, what that ended up doing is we needed larger doorways and then the bathrooms to be able to turn wheelchairs, which ended up reducing what was multi-person rooms down to 1 person based on square footage. Russell building, that was actually renovated in 2018, beautiful facility. That is part of what we call our subacute therapy unit, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then our wood building within our Cobbs, we have that projected also for ADA renovations in the future. And you can see kind of the age of all of our buildings. Our newest building, of course, is 1989. Our memory support unit in 2011, that actually sits as part of the Russell building. So that is part of the initial facility. Okay, the subacute therapy unit. Thank y'all. The state has provided $6 million in funding for that facility. We also ended up with $11 million in federal funding. So this is comprehensive care, very similar to what Commissioner Tanner talked about in transitional support services. We recognize there's a veteran population out there that won't completely need long-term skilled care for the rest of their lives, that based on their acuity as well as their diagnoses, we believe that we could implement a bunch of the activities of daily learning, daily living, ADLs and IADLs, to be able to transition them back into their families and communities. Y'all have been great supporters of this unit. It is the first statewide unit of its kind. I will tell you, it was completed last summer by the time we got all of the infrastructure and the IT in there to open up the facility with phone lines, all that good stuff. As y'all know, we transitioned contractors at that time or just soon after that. We do have a commitment by our current contractor, we believe, beginning this next fiscal year, and then into the fall, we will have that open. We're piloting kind of one patient that gets admitted on Friday to try it out, this functionality of what this unit will do, albeit we're not actually opening the unit itself because, of course, that takes additional staffing. Our veterans home in Augusta, we call it the Blue Goose, is what most folks know it as because of the blue tiles. It was built in 1968. It has not undergone major renovations, mainly because of asbestos abatement. So that's a significant cost that also is in our COBS. Had some public area renovations as well as the first floor, but for the most part, it is the way it was back in 1968. We did reduce bed count, mainly because of infection control, we had 4 people per room. We're now down to about 2 people per room. But so that's our facility in Augusta. So this is what facilities look like around us. I will tell you that top right facility, the Colonel Robert Howard Nursing Center there in Alabama, just outside of Birmingham, I visited a couple of weeks ago. It is 12 years old and is the new model of VA care. And so if you look, that top right corner, that is actually a room I saw, and that is their standard for what the VA is looking for and where you would want to put your veteran, whether that's your mom, your dad, or even me, that needs skilled nursing. That is what they look like. Our Russell building kind of looks like that bottom right picture to some extent, but this is very different from the facilities we have currently. So I was asked about the funding for our homes. Just so you know, I think I've identified it. The VA requires the match to federal funds to be 1 cent more than what they give. So they have a prevailing rate. You can see for Augusta, it's just over $304 a day. For Milledgeville, it's $277 a day. That's based on your service connection. You can see what VA funding will pay and then what we look at for state funding, and then we combine it with patient fees. What I've highlighted there is state appropriations have not increased. They've actually decreased over the last 10 years. When we took cuts back in 2021, my predecessor chose to take those primarily in our homes and reduce the population. I chose not to take that 1% cut in 25 from the homes because we've kind of decimated them, and we need to get that population up. And then you can see our patient fees have increased every year over the last decade. I know I was hoping Representative Oliver was here because I know she'd ask me about Medicaid. So I was ready. So our local Medicaid rates, you can kind of see, they're about in line with the prevailing rates. Our homes actually provide a higher level of care, as you can imagine, being in a communal setting with those that have served, that camaraderie, as well as sometimes the enhanced needs, both physical and mental and behavioral health of our veterans, is a higher level of care than Medicaid. I will tell you, specifically talking with our Milledgeville home, there are lots of Medicaid facilities, and so it's very likely that somebody would put their loved one, that veteran, in a home closer to them versus putting them centrally located in either Milledgeville or Augusta. And so we think this is a great benefit to our state and is the reason why we've kind of kept the current funding structure that we've had ever since we opened our first home, which is state appropriations, and then a big piece is federal. if you look at what we have asked for in the budget, because we've not had any increases over the last decade, we had asked for a 10% increase to go into the baseline budget. And what that will do is not only allow us to help with those operational costs, but we can potentially bring in about a dozen more patients into our Milledgeville home. This will also help us because with the tremendous state salary raises that the governor and you all have approved over the last few years, our Augusta University counterparts have gotten those increases, but our contractor, either the old one or our current one, operational costs have had to remain the same because of appropriations. So they've not seen any increases. So staffing primarily for our Milledgeville home has been an issue, very similar to what you heard from Commissioner Tanner. So the challenges of us becoming a Medicare, Medicaid facility, and I know many of y'all probably know much more about this than I do, but we're not necessarily set up for short-term rehab, so Medicare is not necessarily what our homes are designed for. However, we do use Part B, so any of your outpatient services, those are paid for by the veteran through their Medicare Part B, OTPT, which is done in the facility, or if they have to go out for any sort of specialty care. We would compete against other facilities for a limited Medicare budget. And you can see the split that I got from DCH is about 35-65%. And of course, that does put those veterans' assets and their estate at risk for recoupment by the state. So we've not had that model because our current model basically leverages federal funds as best as we can. So when state appropriations go up, we can bring in more patients, federal appropriations go up. The VA has said that we can have up to almost 2,000 veterans. They would fund both construction and then that prevailing rate, their portion of that a daily rate for our veteran patients. That leaves us about 1,500 beds short for the state. I was also asked about waiting lists. Milledgeville, we're at 12. Augusta, we're at 4. We don't have a large waiting list, and that is intentional. Because we've not been able to increase the number of patients and beds, we've not actively marketed our homes. I know if we did so, that waiting list could grow exponentially, but without the state appropriations to match the federal appropriations, right now we're kind of capped out at about 145 beds for Milledgeville and 120 for Augusta is about what our funding allows. I've talked about the staffing challenges for Milledgeville, and then of course we are reducing our bed count in Milledgeville too based on the ADA renovations. So you can see a high of 375 will eventually, once we completely renovate all of our buildings, will be down to about 230. So I know I talked briefly about this before, but the Senate subcommittee that met to look at the need for additional skilled nursing homes, veteran homes here for the state, recommended several things in combination with the independent research we had done by Kennesaw State. Home in the our immediate needs are homes in the north and in the south. We did find space and land through state agencies for Waycross. That is actually co-located with Coastal Pines Technical College, so we were able to leverage some synergies with their programs that they already have, such as CNAs, geriatric CNAs, et cetera. That is a matching 35% grant. I know we had put that in the amended budget. We are carrying that need in the FY25 budget, and that means costs go up. So every time we delay building a new home, costs go up. We've got a new requirement for Build America, Buy America, which are increasing construction costs. And then additionally, if we get money in the FY25 budget, what that means is we will submit the grant in April of 2025. We will find out if we have gotten the grant in about October 2025, which will put us in 2026 to be able to go out for contract and procurement, and then that just delays things several years. So that is why we're kind of pushing. This is our long-term agenda because we know there is such a great need for Georgia's veterans. Our veterans, albeit about 10% based on the national population are younger, so 65 and younger, then overall, we know that that population is aging. So that is what the Waycross facility would look like. Again, the small kind of single room, single bath, small home concept is what the VA calls it. And that was done again by Kennesaw State through an independent research project. And then that's about the funds we expect to build, just over 100 beds down there in Waycross. That's the 35% match, where the feds will match 65%. And we do know that the VA, I think I relayed this before, is interested in us growing homes because they have such a small presence here in Georgia. They fund the states to do this. They expect the states to do this. And we know that they are looking to award more grants for more beds. So the renovation projects we keep doing kind of fall lower on the priority, where if we were to build a new facility with more beds, that would go higher on their priority list, which is kind of the same thing we'll talk about with the Augusta Cemetery. So I was asked about this. So on the left side is what the VA uses. They use a 75-mile radius to determine if there is coverage with a veteran cemetery, be it national or a state cemetery. No residency requirement, so that does include Fort Jackson in South Carolina covering the Augusta area. There's a very small portion of the Augusta kind of CSRA that is not covered by an existing cemetery. However, that is as the crow flies. If you actually do the driving mileage to any of those cemeteries, they say cover the Augusta area. All of them are well outside the 75 miles, the closest of which is in Fort Jackson, is 83 miles away. There's about 60,000 veterans in Augusta, and we do know that they have the population to support a cemetery. Just so you know, we've been applying for a grant for them for the last 3 years. We started out at 22 on the priority list. We're now at 35. We'll never get there, quite honestly, because of that left side map and that 75-mile radius. So unfortunately, because the VA will not provide money, mainly because they're not funding new cemeteries. They're putting those in renovations. And even our renovations in Glenville and Milledgeville, which are, you can't really see it, at 21 and 22 did not get funded. And that's with us actually running out of space. We anticipate it within the next 5 years. So we'll go up on that list as we get closer to running out of space, but we don't believe Augusta will ever be on that list, mainly because the VA does not get enough money to be able to grow cemeteries, brand new cemeteries. So new construction is not what they prioritize. Now, Augusta, we found this in our archives, has been asking for a veteran cemetery for a very long time. This is a 1999 article when they were competing with Canton. And of course, the National Cemetery went to Canton. But the current cemetery, the land they've got identified is 219 acres. It's part of the Gracewood site. 58 acres is the initial development. And we have gotten assurances from the VA that if we went out with expansion projects, once we kind of filled that space, that we would fall within the priority list just like any other cemetery. They would also fund it as far as our plot allowances go. We estimate a medium class cemetery. Augusta itself has put in about $2 million in funding that will demolish the existing buildings there on the Gracewood campus, as well as they've designed an entry monument with twin drives, a bell tower that the VA does not pay for, but actually sounds the chimes, as well as the service anthems. They've agreed to do that. Initial construction, when we did the site survey several years ago, was about $10 million. It's gone up to $12 million. And we believe that first couple of years, the operational cost will be about $100,000 until we start receiving the federal funds for the plot allowance, and then can fund that ourselves. We'll have to build that up initially. We do believe it's going to be a very busy cemetery, probably doing at least the number of interments as our other two combined. And so We've got 9 people at our Milledgeville Cemetery. That's probably the footprint we'll start with, but we expect it'll probably grow to about 12 people that are needed, which is the tune ongoing based on current salary ranges, about $850,000 a year to be able to staff that cemetery with state employees. So this is kind of what their plan looks like. I just wanted to give you a picture so you could see that yourself. And then the last thing, I know we've been asking for this since about 2019, a homeless coordinator. So we work this on the margins, trying to help our homeless veterans. And we have several people that kind of come together, and we've got one now we're working with. We need somebody focused that kind of brings in all of the community agencies, our VA homeless coordinators, all of those different grantees that get federal funding for this to help our veterans get housed. I don't think veteran and homelessness belong in the same sentence, but unfortunately, we're about 25% of your homeless population are veterans, and we're seeing the number of women veterans and those with children increasing. So we ask you to consider that again. That's a position we've kind of leaned out our organizational structure, but this is something that we truly need a dedicated person to help bring together as an agency. And I know I've covered a lot in a short amount of time, and it's late, but I would love to take your questions.
That was great. That was a lot of good information. Thank you. Thank you for what you're
Thank you,
doing,
ma'am.
even more than what you're telling us about. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Chairman Matthew.
I gotta at least ask one or two. Okay, where in here is for software? For
So-
you to upgrade your software?
So we don't necessarily need to upgrade our software. So we have a program called Veterans Benefits. We pay for it out of our admin program.
Okay.
What has happened is because we have additional users and they've increased costs from last year to this year, it's going to cost us more. And so I know I kind of talked about that one position we've held vacant in our admin program, which is an admin position. My predecessor never filled because that program is always at the very end of the fiscal year, we're close to being over budget. And so he left that vacant, and we've used that kind of for all of those expenses that may come up, to include the increase in software cost. And so that's why we're asking to continue to keep that position vacant, but yet give us the funding so we can handle things such as an increased cost in that software.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? And I do have two of my experts here with me. Mr. Russell Fagan over here, he's our executive director over Health and Memorial, so he's in Milledgeville. And then Mr. Mark Demers, he's our Chief Development Officer and Chief Financial Officer. So I did come with a team.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from our members? Not seeing any. Thank you for this very thorough packet. It will help us as we begin to go to work.
Well, thank you, and please let me know if you need any additional information. Happy to provide it. So thank you all so much. Again, thank you for your patience and endurance. I know today was a very long day.
Well, we feel the same way about you, waiting to be here and to present. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move to the sign-up sheets. So let's start now with Dr. Pamela Rochelle, Fulton County Government Chief Operating Officer. Great,
Yes,
thank you.
I'm here. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am grateful for this opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here to speak in support of the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities FY25 budget request. Specifically, I am here to ask for your consideration of the department's $5.6 million funding request as originally submitted to support the first Behavioral Health Crisis Center in Fulton County. The proposed FY25 budget includes $3.8 million, as Commissioner Tanner shared earlier today. And again, this is for the first behavioral health crisis center in Fulton County. With this $3.8 million, this results in a $1.8 million funding gap when compared to FY24 at $5.6 million and when compared to the original funding request for FY25 of $5.6 million. Given the economic pressures facing behavioral health services and the level of need within this population, the full $5.6 million is needed to successfully operate the Fulton County Behavioral Health Crisis Center. As background, Fulton County is home to 10% of the state's population, but does not currently have a behavioral health crisis center. The Behavioral Health Crisis Center will be located on Metropolitan Parkway, which is just a short distance from here, and will be a center that is providing and will provide access for the entire region. So this is not just a resource for Fulton County residents, but for residents in the counties in Region 3, which includes 6 counties total. Fulton County has provided 100% of the funding for this facility. We are using an existing facility that currently houses public health services. Our model will be very unique in that those public health services will continue on this campus, and we are adding this behavioral health crisis center to that campus with a $15 million investment that the board approved from our ARPA funds. And so not only will we have this behavioral health crisis center, the first in Fulton County, when we create our discharge plans for our constituents, we will have services that are right on the premises that can quickly connect them to community care. We have continued to work very closely, hand in hand, with the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities on intricate details of the design of this facility. We have selected Grady Hospital as our operator who will staff and manage the day-to-day operations of the facility. As you know, Grady has an extensive history in managing behavioral health services. With the increase in labor cost and other cost drivers, we are hearing from our operators that we really do need this full funding so that we can operate this facility in excellence and the way that we are all working to design this facility. We are projected to open for service in the spring, and we will have full operational capacity in FY25. So again, that is why this funding is so important. We know that there is a need for 3 behavioral health crisis centers in our region, as pointed out by the 2023 study from the Behavioral Health State Department. And so again, we ask for your consideration of the department's original $5.6 million request so that we can continue to work toward opening this facility the way that we envision it and the way that it is originally designed. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great informative piece, too, for us to have to work from. So are there any questions or comments from the members of the committee? We know y'all have wanted this for a long time and that it matters. So thank you. Thank you for being here and for waiting so long.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'm going to try to not mess up the names too bad, but y'all bear with me. Okay. Teus Kaiser from Unlock. Great. Of course.
It's
Good to see
Thais.
you.
Thais Kaiser.
Thais.
Yes, but you can call me Ty. At this point, I think we're friends.
Ty. Let's
Yes.
go with that. Good to see you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Again, my name is Thais Kaiser, and I am a mom from Johns Creek, Georgia. I have raised 3 beautiful sons. I have to say that because they're mine. My oldest son, Isaiah, is the reason why I'm here today. Isaiah is 22 years old. He has autism, intellectual disabilities, and struggles with a mental illness. I am here also on behalf of Unlock Georgia, a broad-based coalition whose mission is to expand and enhance home and community-based services to fully support Georgians with IDD. Isaiah has many daily struggles. He's challenged with the everyday basic living skills. He needs support dressing himself appropriately. He doesn't grasp concept of time and money. His reading level is at a kindergarten level. Isaiah needs help with the simplest things like pouring milk, and he will need long-term support for the rest of his life. He is very innocent. He's kind. He's sweet. He's a wonderful brother. Everyone is his friend. And he loves to help everybody. So don't let the diagnosis be the judge of the character. For the longest time, I tried to get Isaiah what's called a now and comp waiver. We know we've talked about the long list. I'm one of the parents that have been advocating to get my son on the list for as long as you can think. Isaiah was denied 4 times. Our last resort was to sue the Department of Behavioral Health. I spent over $60,000 in legal expenses over a 4-year period of our lives to fight just to get him a spot on the list. It was emotionally, financially draining for my family. We eventually won in court, and Isaiah was deemed eligible for a waiver. However, we still don't have a waiver. We're still waiting. For most families in my situation, this is a fight that they can't afford. Families with autistic children are reaching out for help and that they need and deserve, only to be met with a system that is working against them. I will never stop fighting for my son or this community, so please remember this face, because I will be here. Today, I'm here to support the following in the DBHDD budget for the fiscal year of 2025. One, which is the 2,400 new now and comp waivers in the DBHDD budget. This number is bold, but consistent with the recommendations from the IDD Senate Study Committee from 2022. Families want to see a deep reduction of this and an elimination of this list. Number 2 is higher wages for indirect support professionals. Advocates support the addition of the $79.9 million in the DBHDD budget for the fiscal year of 2025 to implement the IDD rate study. Direct support professionals are the backbones of the IDD system in Georgia and deserve adequate wages. We celebrate and appreciate this addition from Governor Kemp in his budget. Please support this item. Again, I love my individual, and he comes with a significant amount of needs. I can't just let anyone take care of my son, so I am just bringing that in to your attention so you consider when making that decision that in order for us to retain better talent, we need to be able to afford them. I'm also a parent that struggles with chronic issues with my pancreas, and I don't retain nutrients. My bones easily break. So for me, I have this drive to get my son the waiver just like many other parents do, because we are all struggling with something, and it's due to the fact that we have to deal with so much stress on a personal level, because our loved ones need so much care, which leaves us very little time for ourselves. Again, I want to improve the current system. I am here to help, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I'll open the floor for the questions, so please ask them away.
Thank you,
Just
Ty.
kidding.
Thank you, Ty. Thanks for bringing this information and these pictures too. But we do have a question for you, okay? So wait just a minute. Representative Donahue.
Thank you, madam. Let me ask you a couple questions. You sued. You spent $60,000 of your money.
That is
What
correct.
did you win? What was the amount?
We put him on the list. We fought to get him on the now and comp waiver list.
Okay, so you won no value, no money. You won basically because you sued to put him on the list.
we don't get the money back. So with the OSHA court, whatever it is that you spent, that's money lost. So had I lost, I would have lost all that money that my family spent.
Okay.
And that's also money that we could have spent for additional support for my son.
Right.
I have 2 sons that have autism at different levels. Isaiah requires a significant amount of support. And he's not the type that I can just leave at home. He's the type that sees everyone as his friend. To give you an example, one time he missed a school bus, and I was walking my other son back. I thought he got on the bus along with the other children, but he actually dropped something. And instead of him running back to me, he got in a car with a complete stranger. And I was lucky that that stranger was an actual parent and dropped my son off at school. And I found out about it from the school because they called me to tell me this. So this is how dire my situation is. Against funds that I could have used for my other son, who doesn't need the amount of support that Isaiah does, but requires a lot of special therapies. And these therapies are not cheap. So just to give you an example, ABA therapy is something that my son needs. So you have what's called a BCBA that writes the program. They charge at least like $325 an hour. And then you have someone that comes and implements and puts that plan in place, and they charge anywhere from $150 to $200 an hour. Insurance is only paid for so much. That means a great deal is coming out of my pocket.
Okay, and thank you again. But now, what are they telling you? Why have you not heard back? And I mean, they're all here. Everybody's been here today. Was there anybody you asked maybe? And I'm not assuming anything. I would have went up personally to that person and had a little conversation.
I would love to know that. From my understanding is that they don't have the support, they don't have the manpower to run the process. From the moment you are deemed eligible, you have to go through several steps. I was deemed eligible, and I was forwarded on to the next step, and I honestly don't know what the next step is because there's not a point of contact that I can. And I know that the previous lady testified that, hey, they were very supportive, but for someone that has been very vocal against what happened to my child, I was actually met with retaliation. So the system does not treat everybody the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Manilowitz.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you for coming down here and being with us, because I know that it is very, very hard when you have a child that requires the level of support that your son does. And I know this because of my own lived experience with my own relatives. And I think it's really important to clarify that when a family gets to the point where they are engaging in litigation, they're not after money. And what I've seen, and I know because I have close relatives who have had to engage in similar litigation in another state, you're just trying to get your child the services to which they are legally entitled. And it is a very complicated, very draining thing, but you're also, if a family is making the choice, and this is what I've seen in my experience and other families who I've talked to, this is not something where you're trying to gain anything other than the rights to which you are entitled. And I know it's very, very, very hard. It's hard on your entire family. But I'm glad that you're here today to share your story with us. Thank you for your patience with everything, and thank you for sharing your story and for advocating for this community.
Thank you. Like you said, it's not about money, exactly what you said. It's about getting my son the support for when I'm no longer here with the health issues that I've had alone. I mean, some days I literally cannot get off my bed, not because I don't want to, because I have a chronic issue with my pancreas. And again, a lot of it is stress related. So my biggest concern all the time is what is going to happen to Isaiah when I'm gone. That sometimes nights I wake up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning just trying to see what's going to happen to my son. These systems are not in place, and there's no one that's going to step in and do what I do.
Right. I know. And we do know. Let me ask you this. So when you did go through the legal process and you said you were given the ability to be on the list and there's a next step, is your son receiving any services while on that for the waiting list, in other words?
So we were able to get some funding from Bobby Dodd, which essentially comes from the Department of Behavioral Health, and I used that for, respite and a day program.
Okay.
Not nearly to the extent of what we would get,
Right.
but I am thankful for every bit that we do receive, because every little bit does matter. Despite my son's diagnosis, with support, he will be able to be a productive member of society. He has a lot to offer. So that's what I'm trying to get people to see, that, hey, don't look at the disability, look at the individual and look at their heart, because I really do feel like these individuals have something to give and teach everyone.
Mm-hmm.
With them, you get love. I mean, true love, honest and sincere. They have so much that I've learned from them, like every day. It's just every day I feel like I'm learning something. I feel like my son in this community has taught me how to be a better person. So I just ask every individual, if you can, just get to know an individual with a disability, because you never know what you might learn from them. You think that you're going to teach them something, but it's often the other way around, just becoming a decent human being.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I want to thank you. I want to thank you not only for sharing your story, but also for being here to support the larger community and the need for the supports and the professionals and the wages. So thank you. And thank you for your patience. It was a long day, I know.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for everything you do. And I'll be here every year after that, until he gets so tired of my face. But again, they gave me something. My son gave me something to fight for. And it was a beautiful community, and I fell in love with them. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Tracy Bryant.
Hello, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tracy Bryant, and I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. My wife Beth and I have raised 4 children in the Atlanta area, and our youngest, Daniel, is a person with developmental disabilities. It is because of Daniel and his friends and thousands of other Georgians with developmental disabilities that I am here today. I am also here as a parent advocate for Unlock Georgia, a statewide developmental disabilities coalition. Every parent, special needs or not, experiences the same joy and pride watching their child develop into their future self. And we have all put forth, whenever necessary, everything for the needs of our children. But for Georgia's special needs families, everything we have may not be enough. There are human limitations, and our families need help. When Dan was in elementary, middle, and high school, he was a very active and happy student. But after high school, there was an abrupt transition to a much more passive lifestyle. We provided everything we could, but with both parents working and on a budget, whether it was employment for Dan or his social life, all we had was not enough. Every parent's dream is to see their child reach their full potential in life. But with our special needs families, there simply isn't enough time in the day or enough bodily energy or enough support resources to see that dream to fruition. It's a heavy load of responsibility to carry alone. Thankfully, after 10 years of waiting, Dan received the waiver last October, and his life has changed immeasurably. In our lives, Beth and me, our lives changed immeasurably too. Before the waiver, there was worry and fear about Dan's future. Too many questions. Today, Beth and I are beginning to experience hope, relief, and joy that Dan can reach his potential. Dan is 33 years old. Today, there are over 7,300 families in Georgia who need hope. They need to experience relief. They deserve to experience some of the joy other families experience. They need your help and your support just like Dan does. Please support the 2,400 waivers in the 2025 DBH-DD budget. We understand it's a large number and that many state agencies are having difficulties post-COVID. But I don't want to see families like mine wait for over 10 years to get services. Lastly, please support the $79.9 million to fully implement the IDD rate study in the DBH-DD budget. Direct support staff deserves recognition and a living wage for their critical work in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving us your written testimony as well, Mr. Bryant. We appreciate you. I do not see any questions or comments right now, but just know that your patience and your perseverance matter.
Thank you very much.
Next, I believe it's Ryan Whitmire.
That is correct. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Ryan Whitmire. I am the current president of SPAD, the Service Provider Association for Developmental Disabilities. I'm also the CEO and president of Developmental Disability Ministries. It's been a long day for y'all, and so I'll be as short as possible. And so the first thing is, Darcy did a great job with her PowerPoint presentation. SPAD, the developmental disability community, fully supports, the efforts of GCDD. Commissioner Tanner, we couldn't be happier, honestly, with the governor putting in the $79 million to fully fund the rate study with the commissioner's ARPA funds to be able to get those in. And it's critical that those go through and it is fully funded. And so the one thing that I want to hit on, just so everybody kind of understands we've been talking about rates, and there was a market shift in demand in the hospital system. You heard about it because they lost so many people, and we did too. And so Commissioner Tanner's talking about 51% have came back because last year rates were increased for hospital positions. The community has the same demands. We've already tried to transition everybody out of the institution, so we are out here doing the same work, and our rates have not changed. To the point that due to the delay in being able to mobilize and get the funding, it has decimated the infrastructure that was already strained. My organization, we've closed 2 homes, not because of lack of need, but due to lack of staff. And that's concerning because, as you can see, the need is great and infrastructure is needed. I'm a Georgia boy, born and raised. I appreciate fiscal conservatism, right? Like, it's in my DNA. The issue is fiscal responsibility to look at market and demand is what needs to happen as well. And we rely on the General Assembly to do that. The one story that I think hits home the most is I recently promoted a person to be our lead. And our lead is a direct support professional. But they do a lot of the doctor's appointments, taking people to doctor's appointments and do all that. Her promotion allowed her to make just over $14 an hour. That's because the reimbursement rate's $10.63, right? And it doesn't really matter if you're a lead or not, right? Her son just turned 16 and got a job at McDonald's, starting out at $16 an hour. He did so well, he got a pay bump within 3 months. That's out of balance of market demand, right? And that's what I think is so important. The first step is funding the rate study. The second step is to ensure that market doesn't get this out of balance ever again. And I can not, I'm begging, right, to don't let it happen, because it's not fair, but it's fiscally, it's not sustainable. We're hanging on barely right now because of this. Before COVID, our overtime was $225,000. Last year, we almost hit $600,000 of overtime. Our turnover rates are so high now, it's embarrassing. And it's not because we're not treating people, well and all of that. There's other reasons besides pay that people stay or leave. But at a certain point, I had somebody resign and they cried because they didn't want to leave. But you got to leave if you can't make enough money to support your family. And so that's what we're asking for. With the hospitals, non-clinical care's at $19 an hour, right? That's huge. We want to be there, but we are extremely grateful to get to $16.70. The other thing that I do want to touch on, because the disability community with GCDD and Unlock and SPAD, we're all on the same page. And it's about wages, but it's also about waivers. And you talk about the waiting list, and there's a lot of people that talk about, well, there'll be another waiting list created, and that is true. But if you have a waiver, when the infrastructure's fixed, you have a waiver, right? If you don't have a waiver, there is really no hope. You're just waiting to be most in need. And Darcy hit on that. It was really small, right? But it was the most in need comment that I think is important, because why do you need a crisis just to get a waiver? And so I appreciate the time, and if you have any questions, more than welcome. But I know y'all have had a long day.
You have too. We know that.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Not seeing any. Thank you, and
right,
thank you
appreciate
for what you are doing. I promise you, we all understand how upside down this feels,
Yep.
and we will continue to try to work toward
Yep.
that.
Yeah, thank you, and we appreciate all of your efforts as well. I know this is not just this year, it's been ongoing, so thank y'all.
Thank you. Safe travels. Kristen Pendergrass. Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's good to see you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. My name is Kristen Pendergrass. I'm the Vice President of State Policy for Shatterproof. Shatterproof is a national nonprofit organization that was established about 10 years ago. Our founder, Gary Mandel, lost his son as a result of his son's addiction, and he created the kind of organization that could provide services and supports that would have benefited his family as they were struggling through Brian's substance use disorder. There are three main pillars of our work. The first is educating and empowering communities. The second is reducing addiction stigma. Georgia was actually the third or fourth state that we partnered with to do a statewide anti-stigma campaign with Georgia Recovers and DBHDD. So that launched in June of 2023. And then the third pillar of our work is increasing access to quality addiction treatment. And we do that by a quality treatment locator called treatmentatlas.org. It started in 2020 with 6 pilot states. It has since expanded to 14 states around the country. And the basic idea is, I hope you haven't, but if you have ever had to search for addiction treatment and you go on Google, you just get a page of ads. And it's really hard to know what kind of services they offer, where these facilities are. Do they offer evidence-based services? Do they take by insurance? So Treatment Atlas provides a way to demystify this treatment landscape. When you go on, you take a quick 10-question screener. You can do it for yourself or a loved one. Then it helps guide you towards the kind of treatment you should be looking for and the kind of things you should be thinking about, like maybe mental health services are also provided at a facility. We do not take money from providers, so there is no preferential placement of providers or facilities on the results page when you're looking at, a certain radius or certain services. It does cost money. It's not free, not for individuals. For individuals, it's free. You don't have to set up an account. It's anonymous. But for the state, and typically it is funded by states, it's based on population. And for Georgia, it's $400,000 a year. So I can walk you through a little bit of what the setup looks like, and then the $400,000 a year is also the maintenance of the tool. Basically, we get a list of licensed SUD treatment providers from the state. We send out a survey to all of them and get a bunch of data points about what kind of services they offer, what kind of payment they accept, what kind of populations they serve. Do they serve young people, et cetera? We verify and validate all the data to make sure that it's accurate. And then we load it up into our system. All of that takes about 1 full year because there's a lot of facilities and there's a lot of data points to get on. And then once that is live, then we have a launch and we work with our state partners to get the word out. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. 2 more things I'll mention about the tool. The first is we also have incorporated patient experience surveys. So if you or someone that you know has been through SUD treatment at a facility, you can go on and answer a quick questionnaire and basically leave a review. We also validate those to make sure that the language is appropriate and everything. And then the other benefit to the state is that there's a back-end portal that gives a statewide view of where the substance use disorder treatment is in the state, and it shows it based on these quality metrics. So you can get a good idea of the network adequacy, not only statewide, but in a region, or you could do it based on MCOs, et cetera. It's a very dynamic tool that I am not a data person, so I have not dove into everything that it can do, but we have heard from a lot of states that it's a great tool for knowing where there are good providers that they should, raise up, and where there are providers that may be struggling, where some technical assistance or support could be helpful. If you searched now in Georgia and did a very wide radius, the 2 states that are closest here are Florida and North Carolina that are fully built up. But we would love to work with you to get Georgia on the Treatment Atlas system, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the members of the committee? And we'll be able to talk more about this among ourselves later, because you've left us some good information that Amber and I have. It is a tool, and it sounds like a very powerful one that could have some really worthy results. So I thank you for the number of times you've visited Georgia and have shared with us and have offered this opportunity. So
yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'm always happy to come
we'll
here.
be in further discussion about
Wonderful.
it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much. Next we have April Castra, maybe? Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Abril Castro. I am the Georgia Civic Engagement Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance. We do have a 1-pager for y'all, not enough, so we will follow up on a different day. NTWA is the leading voice for the estimated 2.2 million domestic workers who work as direct care workers, nannies, and house cleaners in homes providing essential care. Our members provide supportive services to children, aging, adults, and family members with disabilities in the home every day. While NTWA is a national organization, our Georgia chapter is a locally operated membership-based org whose members are part of the direct care workforce in the state of Georgia. I testify today regarding the fiscal year 25 budget as it relates to the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, and specifically the funding for the NOW comp waivers. which serve populations with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You all know this. Governor Kemp has included an estimated $79.9 million in state general funds for the rate increases for this program, and we support this allocation of funding, and also emphasize the fact that there needs to be guarantees that any rate increases be accompanied by a mandate that the increased dollars go towards the wages of direct care workers. Direct service professionals, otherwise known as DSPs, are the critical members of the direct care workforce that provide community living support for these individuals with disabilities. Right now, studies show that our DSPs are currently earning about $10 an hour. And because of these low wages, there are shortages of DSPs across the state and consistent turnover in the field. We have actually seen that many of our members, right, they were care workers before, and they often are drawn to other industries for higher wages in order to meet the basic needs of their households. In 2022, you all know the state commissioned a study of rates for the various services in the Now and Comp waiver programs. Initially, in their calculations, the consultants used a wage for direct service professionals of $15.18. We were able to provide public comment along with other groups to get that number higher, and the study reissued another minimum wage used for DSPs that was raised to $16.70. Ultimately, the study determined that it would take $107 million to implement all the recommended rates for services in these programs. DSPs are essential workers that support individuals with disabilities. Despite the increasing demand and essential nature of home care, their caregiving work of the direct service professionals is still not valued. Workers receive extremely low pay, few benefits, and enjoy limited protections. Improving the working conditions for the home care workers is critical to address staffing shortages and consequently ensure that waiver participants can access the care that they need. It is for these reasons that NDWA, one, supports the $79.9 million in state funding to implement the recommended rate increases for Now and Comp waivers, and two, believes that providers should be required to attest that the wages paid to workers as a condition of receiving these rate increases. We believe this increased funding should be accompanied by measures that assure that wages of direct service professionals increase to $16.70 as recommended in the rate study. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reiterating how important that is. Everyone here, I think, is a big believer. So thank you for your patience and for staying to make your comments known. I don't see any questions or comments at this point. Next is Catherine Bassel.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Catherine Vassell. I'm the CEO at Partners for Home. Partners for Home is the lead agency for the Atlanta Homeless Continuum of Care. We are the coordinating body that creates and executes the strategy to reduce and end homelessness in the city of Atlanta. There are 9 COCs around the state of Georgia, so every community across the state has a comparable entity like Partners for Home, whether it's led by their local city or county entity or a private nonprofit that helps provide that coordination. I will keep this short and sweet, but we are here to advocate for 2 funding requests for our efforts. One is related to something that Commissioner Tanner spoke to earlier in his presentation, which is the inclusion of funding for street outreach. This was something that was supported in the prior year's fiscal budget, but was designated as a one-time fund. And has been not included in this year's FY25 budget. This work is absolutely critical. We have deployed these funds currently through 2 partner providers in the community, Mercy Care and Gateway. They fund and staff 2 dedicated street outreach teams that provide 9 full-time employees on the streets of Atlanta, providing dedicated street outreach to people in our community who are unsheltered. This work is actually pivotal to support the next ask, which is related to our most recent housing initiative called The Melody. Many of you may have seen some of the news reports and publicity that we've received over the last couple of weeks related to The Melody. But The Melody is a part of our larger housing initiative. It is a charge by Mayor Andrew Dickens, who has said, the work that we are doing is great, but it's not enough, and it's also not fast enough. And so to that end, the city has ambitiously stood up to say, we're going to commit publicly owned land and use alternative housing products to create 500 units of housing for people who are homeless rapidly. The goal is to develop 500 units by the end of 2025. And to that end, we have opened the first of its kind, a container housing, tiny home housing initiative that we've called The Melody in downtown Atlanta. It was developed out of repurposed shipping containers that were donated to us by GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. Those containers had previously been used as ICU rooms around the state during COVID, and those hospitals no longer have a use for them. So we decided to take them as a donation from GEMA and repurpose them into housing for people who are unsheltered. That work was done in 4 months' time of construction, which is absolutely unheard of in housing development world. And we now have 28 residents that have already moved in the last 2 weeks, and we have another 12 residents that are slated to move in over the next 2 weeks. We have committed the capital for the project, and we have identified the source for the operating costs for the site over the next several years, over its lifetime. But the biggest gap for us is determining where the costs for services will come from. We are currently contracting with Hope Atlanta to provide those services. They have 4 staff on site, 2 licensed clinical social workers and 2 certified peer specialists. And the cost for that operation year-round is a little over $500,000. And we're looking to the state to support the services funding for this operation so that we can continue to serve people that have high acuity, high needs with severe mental illness, addiction, and other medical long-term permanent disabilities that we can get off the streets of our city and into permanent housing and support them long-term so that they don't return to homelessness. And I will just stop there in light of the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Oh, I would just add one other thing, that the outreach team that we funded and we are currently funding with funds that are slated to be removed from the budget, those teams are being used to outreach and engage with individuals who are on the street so that we can get them into housing like The Melody. So with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Representative Nolowitz.
Yeah, just one quick comment. The Melody is very impressive. I would love to have the chance to see it in person. I've been read about it and looked at it, and the story behind the name I think is compelling. About Melody, the unsheltered woman who died, she froze to death basically, and I think that having this open in time for this cold weather, I think was very meaningful, and it's very impressive.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And yes, absolutely. Melody died on the streets of Atlanta. Melody was an incredibly complex case, somebody with comorbid conditions, both severe mental illness, addiction, as well as medical issues. And we struggled, despite our best efforts in working with our partners at DBHDD and Grady and Viewpoint, among others, to find the right housing solution for her. And we were just not able to do that due to the severity of her challenges.
Not seeing any other questions. Thanks for making sure that we all have this to work through. That'll help as we make some really difficult decisions, as you can tell from being here right now. But I want to thank you for the work you do and for the patience to be here with us today and to wait to share your message.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next is maybe Katrina Atmore? Yes, good.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the other committee members. We just came to say thank you so much for what you did for citizen advocacy on last year. And I brought with me Aaron Litchke. He's Executive Director and Matchmaker for Atlanta DeKalb Citizen Advocacy, along with his board member, Bo Gamison, who's giving you all information about citizen advocacy. So we're not going to stand here and say a whole lot. We just want to say, I wish that mom was still here that left, to say to her that citizen advocacy was founded on that question: what will happen to my son or daughter when I'm no longer here? Dr. Wolfensberger, who founded Citizen Advocacy, thought deeply about that. And so for 47 years, Citizen Advocacy has been building a bigger we by asking people who stand on thick ice to stand beside somebody who is on thin ice, and to think about what will happen when that loved one is no longer there. So I just want to say that we believe in citizen advocacy, that if you're not loved, you're not safe. So we're very intentional about bringing people into long-lasting relationships, freely giving relationships, and supporting those relationships. So with that, I want to bring Aaron up to just really share like the heart of the matter, the thing that really drives citizen advocacy with such urgency, such passion, for us to continue this good work. So thank you, and we want to ask you for your continued support in FY25 for $400,000. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Katina said that we've been around for over 47 years. And what that means is that for 47 years, ordinary Georgians have been stepping up for their neighbors and community members with developmental disabilities. And I just wanted to highlight one of those stories and really lift it up right now with you. In your packet, there is a picture of Kim and Marie. And you can tell right there, from the beginning, Marie, the advocate, met Kim when she was 6.5 years old, and she was in an institution. And at that time, she stuck by Kim not just as an advocate or that, but as a loving family member. And up until this year, unfortunately, Marie passed away from cancer this last October, or this last end of the year, somewhere around October. But what's so special about that, and what's special about citizen advocacy relationships, is up until that day, I was sitting with Marie as she continued to think about Kim, and how Kim in her 30s can continue to live the best life she can. And that included bringing circles of friends from her faith community and worship center to other community members and people that over the last 25 years together that they've interacted with. So Kim is still supported to this day, even though Marie has left us. So thank you.
Oh, your message is powerful and your work is meaningful. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for hanging in here this long too, to remind us of that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, thank you. Next, we have Georgia Radio Reading Service.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Radio Reading Service, and I have brought with me the new chair of our board, Dr. Vincent Martin, who is he's had a longer day than almost anybody because he injured his knee over the weekend. He went to his orthopedist this morning and is scheduled for surgery on Thursday. But he's here. He's going to make his way to the table while I'm here at the podium, so I thought I would just start while he is making his way to the table. So we're the Georgia Radio Reading Service, GARS for short. We've been around for going on 43 years, and our mission is to improve the quality of life for everyone who is blind, visually impaired, print impaired, has dyslexia, has some reason they can't handle printed materials. Our service is for anybody like that. We have over 230 volunteer readers who read from magazines, newspapers, and books. We also have public service announcements, and we also do our own programming, which we call service programs. We're really podcasts about topics of interest to the community. We are a radio station, and we are also a live web stream, and we're on some streaming apps. We're on TuneIn, and we estimate approximately 11,500 to 12,000 people tune into our program annually. The audience is very diverse. We provide our services free of charge to any resident of Georgia who's visually impaired or otherwise print disabled. Some listeners are blind from birth, while others have lost their sight through illness, age, or accident, or other conditions. Keep this short as well. I did want to express our immense gratitude for funding us at the level that you did for this fiscal year. We were able to use some of those increased funds. We're underway of a large needs assessment study, and we will be done with that in March, and we want to implement what we learned from that into the future so that we can meet our listeners where they are as far as content and technology. The technology landscape changes quickly and constantly, and so we're trying to stay at pace of that as well. And so I will, I think I'm going to go ahead and introduce Vince to save time. So Dr. Martin he became our chair this past summer. He's been on our board for over 20 years and has served as vice president for many of those years. He's held a variety of positions in the field of rehabilitation engineering and research, including rehabilitation research scientist for the U.S. Veterans Administration, and has also served as a member of the Georgia Association of Rehabilitation Resources and Services, as well as serving on the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Board. His current day job is Digital User Experience Accessibility Analyst for Regions Bank. He's a highly accomplished academic, having earned 7 university degrees, including 3 undergraduate degrees, 3 master's degrees, and a dual doctorate in economics and systems engineering. And he was also a 3-time U.S. Paralympic team member, and has banged up this knee before, evidently. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Martin.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and address you. I've spoken at TED before, and over the years in approaching people, the thing I was taught was people will always pay attention to a narrative or a story because we always have some type of story. GARS is a very unique entity, and the best way for me to talk about GARS is to talk about stories that GARS does. As she said, we have over 250 volunteers. We could not do it without the volunteers. And some of the stories of the volunteers are unique. One is from a unique person that I know. This person was in school years ago and lost their vision while they were in college. And they came from a really big reading family. And they didn't have the opportunity to read the newspaper. And back then, the only way you could read the newspaper if you had lost your vision was with GARS. And I had one of those radios as well. It's an old analog wooden box with one knob on it. Mono, but if you cannot read the newspaper, if you don't have access to print, it sounds better than anything you could ever imagine that's digital when you don't have access to information. And GARS provides that. That person was able to go through school and do a number of things, participate in all types of things, but also, quote unquote, continue to read. As the world changed, information became much more fast-paced, much more complex. And in order for places like GARS, in order to keep up with the rest of the world, they had to move ahead. I was the vice president back in the early aughts when we were able to survive. Most radio reading services went out of business. Literally, we stayed in business because we got an emergency grant from this actual committee years ago. That was in 2015. Right now, we have an endowment, and we have increased our outside funding significantly, but it also allowed us to go digital. Instead of that old wooden radio player, now you can go to our website. If you don't have a digital account, if our signal that we're sending out right then does not use something that's quote unquote digitally copyrighted, you can listen for free because we believe anyone should be able to hear even if they don't have the actual legal access. They haven't been able to get to a doctor. So if it's not copyrighted, we'll let you listen to it for free. You can listen to it on your Alexa if it's free in that way. We could only do that because we did get a significant amount of money through the state, and we provide information for people that are blind and visually impaired, but we also provide it to people that have all types of print handicaps, and that comes in all shapes and forms when you have some type of disability. But that person that I was talking about years ago who was able to do that and was able to, quote unquote, move into the digital age with me is a very unique individual because that person was me. I come from a reading family. My mother graduated in 1958. When she died a few years ago, she was visually impaired, but she had access to everything you could imagine because she had sons that were computer scientists and one that was blind. And she was also a reverend, so she had everything you could imagine concerning 147 different versions of the Bible all the way back for everything you could imagine, but she got it from her sons who would come home in a car at Christmas. We had a sign that said, "We'll work for food." So we would trade her computer equipment for food, but we also got the ability to read. I, with the access from other people, especially GARs, have been able to read. I've now read with my family. I'm the one that's read the most. I read over 4,000 books. I'm at 3,890 right now. I read 311 last year. I read regards every day. I can listen to regards now through my phone because I helped us move into the digital age, and it is our goal for anyone that needs to be able to read, that has any type of need to be able to get it, and it's our goal to be able to do it as cheaply as possible. As an economist, my goal is to maximize as little amount of income for as many people as possible. We know how many people are in Georgia, and we're using the money we got at the end of last year to do a survey and a study. We're utilizing the best company we could find, and they're based in Oklahoma, and they work with Oral Roberts University. And I like them because they actually use the same research methodology that I use. And they're going to help us find as many people that are visually impaired and show us how we can reach them, and then we'll show them how they can access information again and have a rich and rewarding life like I had with my family, because I couldn't imagine not being able to read. And now I can't imagine not being able to help anyone else that can read. So I'll do anything to help GARs, and I thank you for the opportunity to be able to tell you that story about that person.
Thank you so much. That is just an incredible story. I didn't want to rush you. Did you have anything else?
No, well, that's yeah, I think Vince said it all. I did want to add just that we read from almost every publication in Georgia, every newspaper, every community newspaper, things, anyway, I had a list, but we read from every newspaper across the state, and as well as the national newspapers and all kinds of specialty magazines too, and books.
Well, thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions? Sure, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is incredible. Do you remember the lady's name that was here last year?
Actually, well, who came with me? I was here last year with Jasmine, who is one of our employees and a consumer. Is that who you're thinking of? Jasmine Sebron?
It was the older lady?
Oh.
It was the older lady and her daughter brought her.
No, I do remember. She wasn't with us.
Okay, I thought she was with you guys. Anyways,
I do remember
she
who
was
you're
a
talking
big
about.
advocate,
Yes,
too, for
yes.
this reading program,
Yeah.
and I'm just excited. It's great to hear the history. Thank you so much for telling us your story in the history of GARS. That's kind of great.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and we'll hope that surgery goes really well.
Number 10, it should.
Oh, my goodness. Well, take good care. Take good care. Thank you.
Thank you, too, very much.
So next, TJ Kaplan, Inseparable.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know the hour is late, so I'll be very brief. I won't take up too much of your time. As you mentioned, TJ Kaplan, I'm here to speak on two items. The first is one that I know you're all familiar with, the APEX program. My colleague Polly McKinney, who's in the back, will also be presenting, and she will be distributing some information to you. Just a couple of data points for you. Since 2015, the program has grown an average of 19% per year in engaged schools and 40% in services provided. Despite that, over 66% of children who have had a major depressive episode still have not received mental health care services. Our request, as I've discussed with many of you individually, is for an additional $10 million to expand the program to the numerous counties that currently do not have services. I believe that encompasses 30 counties that are not covered. Polly, I believe, will be distributing a map that will discuss that. We've been working closely with Voices for Georgia's Children, Chris 180, and the Carter Center, and my client is a group called Inseparable, which is a national mental health nonprofit. The second item I'm here to speak to you about is one that this committee has been incredibly supportive of over the years, and in fact saved from the funding being wiped out during the COVID crisis. And thank you, Madam Chair Dempsey, for your incredible work on that. The program is called Imagine Hope. It is funded through existing program under DBHDD at $250,000 per year. It is a hepatitis C virus screening and linkage to care program. We meet patients where they are at CSBs, MAT clinics, and other core providers. We've conducted 77,399 HCV screenings and have identified 4,330 Georgians in need of care. Of that, 762 have been cured using patient assistance programs and other funding sources. As I think many of you know, hepatitis C is a common, costly, but curable disease. For your informational purposes, the estimated cost to treat each case is $19,000. However, the annual costs of leaving it untreated are $205,760. Conservatively, based on this mathematics and the cure rates, this program, which is funded at $250,000, has saved the state $152 million in uncompensated care. The request is for an additional $500,000 in annual funding to address the program waiting list. And this initially started with a request from Madam Chair Cooper, who I believe sent a letter to Representative Dempsey and Chairman Hatchett. There have also been a number of supportive letters that have come from the community. Highland Rivers sent a letter to Madam Chair. Middle Georgia CSB down in Dublin also sent a letter, and Gateway CSB and Recovery Place down in Savannah also sent a letter supporting the program. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Two very good causes. Are there any questions or comments from any of the members?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you for your patience. Polly.
Hi.
Come speak to us.
I will. I feel like I'm happy to be left with all of you. It's great. It was a really amazing hearing. So Polly McKinney, Advocacy Director of Voices for Georgia's Children, and thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm going to just echo everything that TJ said. We love APEX. I know if any of you don't know what APEX is, by now I've not done a very good job over these last 100 years. But we love APEX. We would love to see funding in the budget to start up APEX. You know, it is funded. Once it's started, then it takes on regular payers just like everybody else. But we're hoping to build it out to the tune of $10 million and expand it. And just to give you some quick data points, and then I'll stop so these guys can speak too. It began in 2015. It's in 735 schools across our state. That's 32% of all schools statewide. 67% of our school districts and 73% of all Georgia counties currently have APEX, and we're trying to blanket the state. Of those 735 schools, APEX serves 44% elementary, 24% middle, and 25% high schools, and then 7% alternative schools. In FY23, almost 15,900 unique students were served in APEX, and more than a quarter of those kids received behavioral health services for the very first time. So, and I know you already know that suicide is one of the leading causes of death for our children, and that kids struggle to learn when they have unmet needs, and this is just really, it's late. I could wax poetic about it, but you all know how important it is to us. So thank you for everything you do. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Excuse me. I'm starting to fall asleep. Boom.
Sorry.
From the committee. Polly, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
We
I
know
appreciate
both
you all so
very,
much.
very important. Thank you for hanging in here.
Thanks. Oh, yeah.
Okay, next we've got two more, y'all. Everybody just take a breath. We're almost there. Elizabeth Apley.
Gee, I thought I was going to get the last word.
No. Poor Ethan. He's going to close us out here in a minute.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Elizabeth Apley. Thank you for your patience and attention. I'm here on behalf of Presbyterians for Better Georgia, the Georgia Supportive Housing Association, House ATL, Enterprise Community Partners, and the Georgia Advancing Communities Together to speak with you again about the Georgia Housing Voucher Program. And I know that you have been our greatest supporters, and we're very grateful for that. You know, none of this money goes to the clients that I'm speaking for. This is money that the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities needs in order to meet its obligations under the settlement agreement that was entered into some 13 years ago with the Federal Department of Justice. And one of the key unmet aspects of that settlement agreement is the obligation to serve this target population of 9,000 people who are homeless with severe and persistent mental illness and cycling through the criminal justice system, the hospitals, and the emergency rooms. So this program is very successful. The Commissioner always speaks with pride about it. It's recognized nationally. As a result of their success, we're going to see another 1,500 people being removed from homelessness and placed into housing with access to supportive services and a case manager to help keep them stably and safely housed, and avoid what we're already paying in this state, in our local communities, for the consequences of their being homeless, of their being repeatedly and frequently incarcerated in the jails and in our prisons, and cycling through the hospitals and emergency rooms. So as we have this increased demand and opportunity to serve this population pursuant to this court order, there is a need for an increase in the FY25 budget of $20 million, which is a big number. It's a round number. I didn't come up with the number. It's a consequence of the increased ability to serve these people. We're at serving about 2,550 people now out of that target population of 9,000, so we're far from exiting the settlement agreement. There's been a huge increase in the price of rent, not only in the rent we all pay and in our communities pay, but that it costs to house these people through these vouchers. And there's been an increase in the cost of providing those critical case managers who help them convert their eligibility for a voucher into a lease, and then to provide them the ongoing support that allows them to remain safely and stably housed. There's also an increase in the bridge funding, these one-time expenses to get those security deposits and the upfront rent, maybe a little bit of furniture, and also to provide those occasional incidentals if there's damage or if there are other relocations. So those expenses have gone from about $1.5 million in FY23 to over $7 million in FY24. So as you can see from the back of the one sheet, this has been a need that is being voiced from all corners, and I know this committee is very mindful of that. The Senate Committee on Unsheltered Homelessness in December of 2022 recommended increased funding. The Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission in their report last year. The Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Committee on Supportive Housing has recommended full funding. And if you read the ACCG 2024 legislative toolkit, they make a very compelling case for the consequences to counties of having to incarcerate this population of homeless people with severe and persistent mental illness. And this program would go far to helping to ameliorate those costs, help to house people, and restore them to health and to their communities. So, you know, this program was cut dramatically by more than a quarter at the outset of the pandemic. You all have been generous in helping to restore that funding. Even after 2 years of increases, we're still $1 million below where we were at the outset of the pandemic, and we need your help. thank you for your generosity and your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions and happy to meet with you if I can be a resource. And we are asking, you know, the committee as a whole to help you in making such a large allocation. We do have an $11.9 billion unobligated surplus. I'm sure no one's mentioned it today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for your constant work on this too, and I know it is straight from your heart. Are there any comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty.
And now the winner. Oh, Mr. James, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this is like a.
We're glad to see you.
This is like the Judiciary Committee, 4 hours long.
You know what?
Wow.
And I'm gonna tell you what. So I'm just gonna break the news to y'all. If we next year we'll probably have to have 3 hearings. We've tried. We try to
Yeah.
break it out and do it and not exhaust the committee. But this takes a good 8 hours of listening for the most part. Really does. But it matters, and
It
every
certainly
voice, including yours, the very last one, matters. So please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ethan James, representing First Class Healthcare. First Class Healthcare is a group of former Emory emergency room clinicians that they are now providing healthcare to inmates in county jails, inmates and pretrial detainees. I want to echo some of the comments that Commissioner Tanner has made about the jail-based restoration program, both during the little budget hearings and earlier today. This is a tremendous, tremendous program, and the return on investment is, I just can't say enough about it. We've heard so much from so many different people about the strain on the resources of the community and people going in and out of incarceration with mental health problems. When you have, no pun intended, but a captive audience and have these inmates and pretrial detainees in these county jails, now is the time to provide them the services, the mental health counseling, the medications they need to stabilize in order to, number one, reduce recidivism, number two, hopefully be less of a burden on our law enforcement community. These programs can also reduce inmate litigation against counties. There are just so many benefits to this, including the safety of our communities, having these people stabilized and normalized. So while Commissioner Tanner did highlight both Cobb County and Chatham County and also a new program opening up in Dodge County, I would encourage, I do have a specific request that I've shared with you, Madam Chair, and Amber, for a specific request for a specific location, but I would really encourage the committee to consider allocating as many resources as possible to expanding this throughout Georgia, because again, the return on investment is just tremendous. And I've also shared with you and Amber some information from the National Institutes of Health that underscores a lot of what I've been talking about today about how good this program is. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Hey, y'all, anybody got any questions?
No? Good night.
It's great. It's a great program. It's good to have you here support that
Thank
too.
you so much,
So
Madam
I
Chair.
appreciate
Appreciate
you.
y'all. Appreciate
Thank
your
you for
support.
your patience.
Yeah,
You earned your gold star tonight. Thank y'all so much, committee. I cannot thank y'all enough for hanging in here and for just being the good listeners that you are. And Amber, oh my goodness, appreciate you so much. With that, we are adjourned, and I will talk to y'all all very soon.
We don't have a meeting.